Well, the simple answer is what we plan today, at this moment or today, or what we strategize today will definitely determine our future. It will determine the path that we take in the way forward to the future. Kind of a simple answer. I'm sure all of you will agree with me. A very pleasant afternoon to each and every one of you as we get ready to officially launch or witness the official launch of something very, very important. And this is organized by the Sri Lanka Exports Development Board under the patronage of the Honorable Sunil Hadunethi, the Minister of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development. We would like to very warmly recognize all our other ministers who are present here, the deputy ministers, members of the diplomatic corps, and our very valuable development partners, public and private sector stakeholders, exporters, distinguished guests, and members of the media as well. ජාතික අපනයන සංවර්ධන සැලැස්ම 2026 එවි දැක්වීමේ නිල උත්සවයට සිදු දෙනා සහභාගී වන සුවිශේෂී දවසක් අපේ රටට ඒ වගේම ඔබ සියලු දෙනාටම සුවිශේෂී දවසක් මේ සංවිධානය කරන්නේ ඔබ දන්නවා ශ්‍රී ලංකා අපනයන සංවර්ධන මණ්ඩලය මගින් ඒ සඳහා මේ උත්සවයට පැමිණි අපගේ ප්‍රධාන ආරාධිත අමුත්තන් කර්මාන්ත සහ විවසාකත්ව ප්‍රවර්ධන අමාත්‍යතුමනි ගරු සුනිල් හල්මෙත්ති අමාත්‍යතුමන් ඇතුළු සියලුම අමාත්‍යවරුන් ඒ වගේම නියෝජ්‍ය අමාත්‍යවරුන් තානාපතිවරුන් ඒ වගේම සංවර්ධන හවුල්කරුවන් ඒ වගේම රාජ්‍ය සහ පෞද්ගලික හවුල්කාර ආයතන ඒ වගේම විශේෂයෙන් අපගේ අපනයනකරුවන් එක්ස්පෝර්ටර්ස් සහ සියලුම ආරාධකයන් සහ විශේෂයෙන්ම අපගේ මාධ්‍ය සහෝදර සහෝදරයන් බොහොම ගෞරවයෙන් මේ උත්සවය පිළිගනිමින් අප සියලු දෙනාට ගෞරවයෙන් අසුනෝනින් නැගී සිටින්නයි මේ ගෞරවයෙන් ආරාධනය we request you to kindly rise to your feet for the national anthem of Sri Lanka. you very much. Please do take your seats and make yourselves comfortable. Established in 1979, the apex body to promote and foster exports in Sri Lanka, and that is the Sri Lanka Export Development Board. And Sri Lanka Export Development Board is in fact the organizer of this event as well. So we have a message now from the Sri Lanka Export Development Board.
Sri Lanka, a jewel of nature and heritage, rises from ocean depths to misty peaks. Its lush forests, cascading waterfalls, and vibrant, diverse people echo a timeless story of promise, shaping a nation brimming with potential. Rooted in tradition and fueled by innovation, Sri Lankan products carry a unique blend of authenticity, craftsmanship, and an island soul, earning admiration across the globe. From rich soils and centuries of trade emerge some of the world's finest agricultural exports: Ceylon tea, coconuts, spices, fruits, and vegetables, all delivering premium quality to international markets. As the renowned Spice Island, Sri Lanka continues to enchant with bold, natural flavors, led by Ceylon cinnamon, soon to earn EU GI recognition. Ceylon tea, famed for its aroma and depth, remains the global gold standard. Coconut products lead in sustainability and quality, while seafood and fresh produce bring the vibrant taste of the island to the world. Sri Lanka's industrial strength lies in forward-thinking, eco-conscious innovation. A global leader in ethical apparel, it produces sustainable garments defined by quality and design. The rubber industry delivers trusted, high-performance products across global markets. Electronics manufacturing is on the rise, offering precision-built solutions for tomorrow's tech landscape. With skilled hands and a strategic location, Sri Lanka's shipbuilding industry launches world-class vessels to sail global seas. Sri Lanka's service exports drive growth through creativity and expertise. As a rising ICT hub, it delivers smart, cost-effective tech and outsourcing solutions to a connected world. The Sri Lankan government champions export-led growth, investing in infrastructure and empowering businesses to thrive in global markets. At the heart of this mission is the Export Development Board, Sri Lanka's leading force in global trade since 1979. As a knowledge hub and guiding hand, the EDB supports exporters to overcome challenges and seize new opportunities. It shapes policy, unites stakeholders, and monitors progress, offering critical guidance every step of the way. The Exporters Forum connects exporters and government bodies to find solutions and drive impact. The National Organic Control Unit ensures globally certified organic practices. The National Packaging Center, an EDB initiative, helps exporters stand out with world-class packaging. Through global expos, trade missions, and networking forums, the EDB connects Sri Lanka to the world. Sri Lanka welcomes investors with open arms, offering modern infrastructure, skilled talent, and an investment-ready climate. Strategically positioned on global shipping lanes and with expanding offshore services, Sri Lanka is fast emerging as Asia's next logistics powerhouse. Sri Lanka's established, stable and trusted government is igniting a renaissance in the nation's export landscape, paving the way for renewed global growth. Under the Vital Island brand, The EDB champions Sri Lankan exports, grounded in competency, sustainability, and authenticity, shaping the island as a trusted global sourcing destination. VEP powers exports, fuels growth, and charts a course to shared prosperity. Let's take Sri Lanka to the world.
I'm sure that deserves a big round of applause. The pride of Sri Lanka to the world, and that was a very encouraging picture. And we all know that Sri Lanka has become one of the finest destinations in the world for tourism, for leisure, for business, for conferences, you name it. Sri Lanka is definitely in the spotlight. And we're now going to invite a gentleman who's going to officially welcome you to this program. And that'll be no less than the chairman and the chief executive officer of the Sri Lanka Export Development Board. We'd like to very warmly invite Mr. Mangala Vijay Singh to welcome you.
Honorable Sulil Haguneti, Minister of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development. Honorable Kamantha Widyarathna, Minister of Plantation. Honorable Ramalingam Chandrasekharan, Minister of Fisheries, Aquatic and Ocean Resources. Honorable Kumar Jayakodi, Minister, and Deputy Minister Satrang Abesingha, and Deputy Minister Eranga Veeratna. Your Excellencies, Member of Parliament, Dr. P. Nandalal Veerasinghe, Governor of Central Bank Sri Lanka, Mr. Shannon Cowling, Country Director, and distinguished representatives of Asian Development Bank, Mrs. Tilaka Jayasundara, Secretary of the Ministry of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development, and Secretary to the Ministries, Head of Institution, Chairman, all distinguished guests, Board members, Export Development Board, and all the export EDB team members, exporters, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon to everyone. It is my great pleasure to warmly welcome you all to the official launch of National Export Development Plan 2026-2030. Today marks a milestone in Sri Lanka export development journey. On behalf of Sri Lanka Export Development Board, I extend my sincere appreciation to all of you for joining us, as well as we unveil a national roadmap that will guide country's export growth and competitiveness over the next 5 years. The National Export Development Plan, NEDP, 2026-2030 has been developed under the guidance of Ministry of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development and through extensive consultation with public and private sector stakeholders. We are particularly grateful to Asian Development Bank for its valuable technical assistance and partnership throughout this process. This plan builds the lessons learned from the National Export Strategy, which was implemented 2018-2022, and respond to the opportunities and challenges presented by an increasingly dynamic global trading environment. It provides a practical and implementation-focused framework to accelerate export growth, diversify product and market, enhance value additions, and strengthen Sri Lanka's position in the global value chain. As national institution mandate to promote and develop export, the Export Development Board recognizes the export are not merely a source of foreign exchange. It is a powerful drive of economic transformations, investment, innovations, productivity and quality employment. Export growth is therefore essential to achieving sustainable and inclusive economic development. However, to achieve truly inclusive and sustainable economic development, we must also place the expansion of our SME in our measures, empowering them to transition into export-ready, globally competitive entities is vital to unlocking Sri Lanka's true economic potential. To effectively scale Sri Lanka businesses and propel our entire export economy toward National Export Development Plan 26-2030, systematically addresses key cost-sector enablers. We are actively focusing on optimizing trade logistics and hub operation to position Sri Lanka as a premier logistic hub, while simultaneously driving trade facilitation by digitizing and streamlining regulatory process to cut red tapes. Furthermore, the plan prioritizes on creating a business-friendly ecosystem. This is firstly completed by targeted trade promotion and market linkage to connect our businesses with high-value global buyers, alongside a great focus on quality management, standards, and ESG compliance to meet modern international consumer expectations. We are investing in skill development, entrepreneurship, and innovation to foster a future-ready workforce driven by technology. The Sri Lanka Cabinet has granted National Export Development Plan 26-2030 reflect the government's strong commitment to an export-led development agenda. More importantly, is provide a clear directions for all stakeholders to work towards common national objectives with greater coordination and accountability. Over the past period, the government has moved decisively to provide a great institutional backing, focusing on streamlined trade facilitation and enhancing the ease of doing business for our exporters. Through targeted measures, the government has recently worked to lower barriers and create more conducive environment for Sri Lankan goods and services to compete globally. This proactive stance ensures that exporters are not navigating the complexity of national export market alone, but are backed by a national framework designed for their success. Ladies and gentlemen, the successful implementation of this plan will require a strong partnership. The government institution, exporters, industry association, investors, academia, development partners, and all other stakeholders have an important role to play in translating this vision into tangible outcomes. The EDB is committed to working closely with all stakeholders to ensure effective implementation, regular monitoring, and continuous engagement. Together, we must create an enabling environment that supports innovation, competitiveness, market expansion, and sustainable export growth. Opportunities before us are significant. Emerging market, digital transformations, technology advancement, and evolving consumer preferences offer new pathways for Sri Lankan businesses to expand their global footprint. The NADB provides a strategic framework to help us seize these opportunities to overcome existing constraints. Today we officially launched the NADB Plan 26-2030. We are not simply introducing a policy document. We are launching a shared national commitment to building a strong, more competitive, and export-driven Sri Lankan economy. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to Ministry of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development, Honorable Minister and entire team of Ministry, the Asian Development Bank, all government agencies, private sector representatives, representatives, development partners, and stakeholders who contributed to the preparation of this national plan. And finally, thank you once again for your presence here today and continued support. I wish you a productive and successful event. Thank you very much.
The plan is ready. The plan is ready, and togetherness is very, very important to make sure that we reap tangible benefits from the plan executed. So the plan is NEDP. A warm words of welcome by Mr. Mangal Vijay Singh, Chairman and the Chief Executive Officer of the Sri Lanka Export Development Board. Now, the Sri Lanka EDB comes under the Minister of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development. So we have the Minister himself as our chief guest this afternoon. And we do also have the Secretary to the Ministry, who we'd like to now invite to address the gathering. The Secretary to the Ministry of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development, Madam Tilaka Jayasundara. We'd like to very warmly invite you, ma'am, to address the gathering.
Thank you, Deepak. Honorable Minister Sunil Handameti, Minister of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development, and other ministers, deputy ministers, member of Parliament, Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Country Director, and other distinguished representatives of the Asian Development Bank, member of the diplomatic community, Chairman and CEO of the Sri Lanka Export Development Board, all the officials of the government institutions and the private sector, and all the exporters, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. It is a privilege to addressing this distinguished gathering at the official launch of the National Export Development Plan 2026 to 2030, a landmark policy framework that will guide Sri Lanka's export development agenda over the next 5 years. First, I would like to congratulate the Sri Lanka Export Development Board and all the stakeholders who contributed to the participation of this important national plan. The NEDP is an outcome of an extensive consultation process involving government institutions, private sector representatives, industry associations, exporters, academia, and development partners. It reflects a shared vision and collective commitment towards building a more competitive and export-oriented economy of Sri Lanka. Ladies and gentlemen, Sri Lanka is at crucial stage of its economic development journey. The challenges, experiences, and recent years have underscored the importance of strengthening our productive sector, expanding foreign exchange earnings, and enhancing economic resilience. In this context, export must play a central role of driving sustainable economic growth and national perspectives. The government and therefore place significant emphasis on export-led development as a key pillar of its economic strategy. The National Export Development Plan 2026 to 2030 translate this vision into a practical and coordinated framework for action. The plan seeks to accelerate export growth through a comprehensive approach that addressing both sector-specific opportunities and cross-country constraints. It focuses on improving the policy and regulatory environment, enhancing trade facilitation, promoting innovation and technology adoption, strengthening market access, attracting export-oriented investments, developing human capital, and supporting sustainable and inclusive growth of the country. Importantly, the NEDP is not merely a policy document. It is an implementation-oriented roadmap that clearly identifies priorities, responsibilities, and its outcomes. It provides a common platform for all the government agencies and stakeholders to work together towards achieving national export objectives in a coordinated and measurable manner. As the ministry responsible for industry and entrepreneurship development, we are fully committed to supporting the effective implementation of this NEDP plan. We recognize that success will depend on a strong institutional coordination, policy consistency, stakeholder engagement, and regular monitoring of progress. Ladies and gentlemen, as key strength of the NEDP is its strong emphasis on partnership. Export development cannot be achieved by government institutions alone. It requires the active participation of all exporters, investors, entrepreneurs, industry associations, chamber of commerce, academias, and development partners. The power sector remains the engine of growth of the engine of export growth. Our role as policymakers is to create an enabling environment that supports competitiveness, innovation, productivity, and investment. Through close collaboration and continuous dialogue, we can collectively address challenges and capitalize on emerging opportunities in the global marketplace. I would also like to acknowledge the valuable support extended by the Asian Development Bank in the formulation of this plan. Their technical expertise and international experiences have contributed significantly to strengthening the strategic directions of the NEDP. Looking ahead, the global trading environment will continue to evolve rapidly. Digital transformation, sustainability requirements, technological advancement, and changing consumer preferences are reshaping international markets. At the same time, competition among exporters nations is becoming increasingly intensive. To succeed in this environment, Sri Lanka must become more innovative, productive, and agile. We must diversify our export basket, move up the value chain, expand into the markets, and strengthen our competitiveness across all the sectors. The National Development Plan provides the framework to achieve these objectives. Today, as the official launch of the NEDP 2026 and 2030, we reaffirm our collective environment to transformation, export into the powerful engaging of economic growth, job creation, innovation, and national development of the country. I'm confident that with strong leadership, effective collaboration, and strong commitment from the stakeholders, we can achieve the ambitious goal outlined in this plan and position Sri Lanka as a competitive and resilient trading nations. Thank you for all your continued participation and support. I wish the National Export Development Plan 2026 to 2030 every success and look forward to working together with all the implementation partners and stakeholders. Thank you very much for your contributions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you very much. The Secretary to the Ministry of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development, Madam Tilaka Jayasundar, ladies and gentlemen. We are not very far away from the official launch of the NEDP, but looking at the audience, we see a very eminent, elite audience, and well, we have in fact the highest level of representation from the Central Bank of Sri Lanka as well. So we'd like to very warmly invite him to address the gathering. Dr. E. Nandalal Veerasinghe, Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, sir. We'd like to invite you on stage for your address.
Good afternoon, Honorable Minister of Industries and Entrepreneurship, members in RMFP, all the cabinet ministers, deputy ministers, representatives from the Asian Development Bank, and members of the diplomatic community, and also the entrepreneurship members of the sports community and business community. It's indeed a pleasure to join you today at the launch of Sri Lanka National Export Development Plan 2026 to 2030, as already announced. It's an important milestone in our country's economic transformation. When it comes to economic transformation, I can remember a lot of times people argue Sri Lanka is an import dependent economy, and so that we need to support imports. Obviously, we need to support imports, but we need to transform economy from import dependent economy into export oriented economy. This is the plan. It's all about how we can transform import dependent economy into export oriented economy. And that's an important milestone that has to be the future of this country. And obviously, the point I would make is at the beginning is you can't export without imports. The people argue that you need to stop bad imports to serve for chain is not going to work to promote export. Export means import and deliver export. So any country that has durable exports can say I want to import as well. But we need to transform this step from import dependent to export oriented economy. So let's make a theme, I think, going forward. So at the outset, I would like to congratulate the government, Development Board, Asian Development Bank, and all public and private sector stakeholders who contributed to the formulation of this comprehensive national roadmap. The development of NDDP reflects a collective recognition that export growth must be placed at the center of Sri Lanka's long-term economic strategy. The launch of the NDDP represents not merely the introduction of another policy document, but the beginning of a coordinated national effort to unlock Sri Lanka's export potential and create a stronger foundation for sustainable economic prosperity. Sustainable means we cannot sustain economic prosperity without converting, having a very good export strategy. So why it is important? Export growth remains a critical pillar of Sri Lanka's long-term economic resilience and sustainable development strategy. The experience of recent years has reinforced an important lesson. The durable economic prosperity cannot be achieved without a strong and competitive export sector. Sri Lanka is a small open economy and that is highly exposed to developments in the global environment. External shocks, what we see even now, rising from changes in global demand, commodity prices, financial conditions, geopolitical tensions, or disruption to supply chains can have significant implications on economic stability. Building resilience against such shocks therefore requires a sustained strengthening our external sector so that we can mitigate or face those shocks without having adverse impact on the economy. In recent years, Sri Lanka has made notable progress in restoring external stability. We have recorded current account surpluses after a long time, for several consecutive years, and rebuild confidence in the economy. However, these improvements have been driven largely by strong growth in worker remittances and a recovery in the earnings of tourism. While these developments have provided much needed support in the short term during a period of adjustment, they alone cannot serve as a foundation for sustained long-term growth and external resilience. That's why this strategy is very important at this point. So sustained economic export growth is crucial for growth and development for Sri Lanka. Particularly given the small size of this domestic economy, a small domestic economy, Sri Lanka's annual export earnings have averaged approximately $12 billion over the past decade, stagnant around $12 billion. It's an export of merchandise goods. The key weakness in export structure of Sri Lanka is low diversity in products and markets. It was continued to be concentrated on two traditional products, namely garments and tea, which account for more than half of the export basket, reflecting the limited product diversification of the private export sector. The export sector also shows a lack of diversification in terms of markets. Europe and the USA continue to account for approximately 40% of product. Strong and diversified export base is essential not only for earning from exchange but also reducing vulnerability to external. These are actual facts that we all know. Expanding exports is therefore not merely a trade objective, it's a macroeconomic imperative. Well-performing export sector generates foreign exchange earnings, supports productive employment and also highly paid employments, attract investments, facilitates technology transfer and strengthen the overall resilience of the economy. Most importantly, it creates the conditions necessary for sustained increases in productivity, income and also living standards of people in Sri Lanka. Against this backdrop, the National Export Development Plan assumes very significant. The NDDP provides a strategic roadmap to transform the export sector by improving competitiveness, as we talked about it, diversifying products, the major issue that I talked about, products and both products and markets, and integrating Sri Lanka's enterprises more deeply into regional and global supply chains. The NDP is focused on strengthening trade facilitation, access to finance, market development, quality infrastructure, supply chain efficiency, innovation, entrepreneurship, and skill development addresses many constraints that have historically limited export. We have been talking about this long time, but we have not been able to address all this. Equally important is emphasized on the promoting environmental, social, and governance studies, ESG standards, which are increasingly becoming prerequisites and more demand for participation in the global markets. The NEDP also rightly recognizes the need to move beyond reliance on a narrow range of traditional export products. Future export growth will increasingly depend on our ability to develop higher value-added manufacturing activities, expand digital products and services, especially service sector, strengthen agribusiness and processed food exports, deepen participation in advanced industrial sectors, and leverage opportunities in knowledge-based services and logistics. Mainly, those are the potential service areas. The successful implementation is important. We have been talking about implementation 2019 to improve there's another strategy. But the successful implementation of this strategy is critical for Sri Lanka's long-term economic stability by promoting export diversification, value addition, and market expansion. The plan could generate sustainable growth in export earnings and strengthen the country's foreign exchange influence. The robust export sector enhances external sector resilience, minimizes undue pressures on the exchange rate, and helps mitigate inflation pressures rising from external imbalances that we are experiencing now. Consequently, export growth remains an important contributor to achieving and maintaining price stability over the medium term. This is one of our objectives as well. Let me just talk a little bit briefly about the role of the central bank in supporting export sector development. Well, the central bank is not directly engaged in export promotion, that's EDP's mandate. It plays a critical enabling role in creating the macroeconomic and financial conditions necessary for export sector development. Sustainable export growth requires a stable economic environment, resilient financial system, and efficient financial infrastructure and intermediation process. These are the areas where central banks, policies, and actions can make a significant contribution in promoting exports from Sri Lanka. Other areas maintain macroeconomic and financial stability is one of the objectives of the central bank. Following the severe economic crisis we had in 2022, Sri Lanka underwent a painful but necessary macroeconomic stabilization process, supported by policy reforms, fiscal consolidation, and external assistance. At present, Sri Lanka is in a phase of gradual recovery and transition toward more sustainable growth. Economic activity has continued to expand, supported by industry and services, while inflation has broadly stabilized to manageable levels, and the external sector has shown a resilience to import-export earnings, tourism and cross-country remittances, and also building up buffers in terms of resources as well. Our growth momentum is still moderate, subject to some shocks that we are seeing now, including global commodity price volatility and geopolitical developments. Overall, the economy is no longer in crisis condition, but still in a post-crisis recovery phase. Gradually moving towards a more stable growth path is indeed very important. The central bank continues to maintain a flexible exchange rate regime in line with the flexible inflation target rate. This is not the framework that's in the law. The flexible exchange rate acts as a automatic stabilizer, allowing the currency to adjust in response to external and domestic shocks. Such adjustments help facilitate the correction of balance of payment imbalances, thereby supporting external stability, while exchange rates must reflect underlying market fundamentals, maintaining orderly market conditions and preserving confidence in the financial market are essential for exports and imports alike. I think this important responsibility for the central bank. Equally important is also maintaining confidence in the global economy through sound macroeconomic management, including fiscal, monetary, and external policies. So macroeconomic stability reduces uncertainty, lowers the risk premium, and create a conducive environment for export-oriented investments. There are other responsibilities for us, especially creating efficient payments and financial infrastructure ecosystem that's also helped exports, and also strengthening the access to finance is other important area that we are supporting, and also improving financial inclusion is also supporting the savings and investing in this to get into supply chain. Other important aspect of exports is facilitating trade finance growth. That's important. Financing for export is important. Trade finance remains one of the most important financial enablers of export growth. I'm sure ADB has been supporting, other World Bank and IFC also been supporting this area. Access to trade finance instruments such as letters of credit, export credit facilities, guarantees, supply chain finance, and working capital financing allows exporters to manage risk, meet production requirements, and fulfill international orders efficiently. This is particularly important for SMEs seeking to enter international markets, where financing constraints often become a major obstacle to growth. The central bank continues to support an environment that enables financial institutions to provide trade finance solutions efficiently and responsibly. Strengthening trade finance availability will be crucial if Sri Lanka is to achieve the ambitious export targets that's going to be announced here, inside under the NEDP. Other areas are promoting, that's one area I understand the digital financial services. They are promoting digital financial infrastructure and fintech innovation. They are also central bank play a very key role in supporting the digital transformation of Sri Lanka's financial system by pursuing a secure, efficient, and interoperable payment ecosystem. Through a regulatory framework that encourages innovation while safeguarding stability, we have enabled the development and widespread use of digital payments instruments, such as device payments, mobile applications, even platforms, and also digital other digital instruments that's in the market now. So, in conclusion, let me reiterate the central bank's commitment to supporting policies and initiatives to facilitate Sri Lanka's export sector and enhance country's external sector resilience. We will continue our efforts to maintain macroeconomic and financial stability, modernize financial infrastructure, promote financial inclusion, facilitate innovation, and improve access to finance for businesses. The success of any national strategy ultimately depends not only on sound policy design, but also an effective implementation at the ground level. It's a very important lesson that we have learned in the past. Translating policy intentions that will be announced today, those policy intentions into tangible outcomes requires strong execution, continuous coordination, and sustained commitment from all stakeholders. I'm sure government and private sector stakeholders will have strong collaboration and coordination in implementing successfully in the next several years. If implemented effectively, with strong commitment and coordination across all stakeholders, the National Export Development Plan can make a significant contribution toward achieving sustainable economic growth, generating quality employment, strengthening foreign exchange earnings, and enhancing resilience against future external shocks. I wish the National Export Development Plan every success and look forward to seeing Sri Lanka realize its full potential as a competitive and export-oriented economy, the transformation we need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your presence and also for your good wishes and for your address, Dr. P. Nandala Weerasinghe, Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Well, words cannot express how grateful Sri Lanka and Sri Lankans are to the Asian Development Bank, ADB, for your continued partnership and assistance in the economic boost and drive of Sri Lanka over the years. And this is no exemption. Saying that, we'd like to now invite the country director of the Asian Development Bank, Madam Sharon Colin, to address the gathering.
Honorable Sunil Anjaneti, Minister of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development, Honorable Dr. Emil Jayanta Fernando, Deputy Minister of Finance and Planning and Minister of Labour, Dr. Nandala Weerasinghe, Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Ms. Talaka Jayasundara, Secretary, Ministry of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development, Mr. Mandala Vijayasinghe, Chairman and CEO of the Export Development Board, Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, and it is a true pleasure to join you for the launch of Sri Lanka's National Export Development Plan 2026 to 2030. On behalf of the Asian Development Bank, I would like to warmly congratulate the Government of Sri Lanka, the Ministry of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development, and the Export Development Board on this important milestone. I would also like to recognize the leadership of the Export Development Board in driving the preparation of this plan and the consultative process that brought together government agencies, exporters, chambers, sector representatives, and development partners. ADB was pleased to support a process that was nationally led and shaped by the priorities of Sri Lanka's public and private sectors. The launch of the National Export Development Plan comes at an important point in Sri Lanka's recovery. The country has made significant progress in restoring macroeconomic stability. At the same time, the recovery remains exposed to external shocks and structural constraints. This is why growth-oriented reforms are so important to build further resilience. Recent developments show how quickly external pressures can affect the economy. Export earnings have continued to grow, but import expenditure has risen much faster, driven in part by higher fuel import costs. This has widened the trade deficit and made reserve accumulation more difficult. In this context, export development is not only about increasing trade volumes. Stronger and more diversified exports can generate non-debt creating foreign exchange, support reserve buffers, reduce reliance on external borrowing, and help Sri Lanka better withstand future shocks. They will also support Sri Lanka's broader macroeconomic reform objectives, including the rebuilding of external buffers under the IMF supported program. The NEDP is therefore timely. It provides a national framework to diversify Sri Lanka's export base, expand into new markets, and strengthen enterprise competitiveness. ADB's support for the National Export Development Plan is part of a broader partnership with the Government of Sri Lanka under the Trade, Investment, and Industry Development Program. Through this policy-based lending program, ADB is supporting reforms to improve economic zones, strengthen SME competitiveness, modernize trade facilitation, simplify regulations, and promote export diversification. This plan aligns closely with Sri Lanka's need to move towards a more competitive, diversified, and export-oriented economy. It provides a practical framework for translating export ambition into focused priorities, identifying where Sri Lanka can compete, addressing binding constraints, and coordinating public and private sector efforts. ADB's recent work on global value chains reinforces the importance of this agenda. Competitiveness today is no longer determined only by low costs. It increasingly depends on reliability, standards compliance, digital readiness, investment linkages, and the ability of firms to move into higher value activities. This is especially relevant for Sri Lanka. The country's export base remains narrow, and participation in regional and global value chains remains below potential. Sri Lanka needs to deepen its existing capabilities while creating new sources of export growth. And this is why the plan's focus on established strengths and emerging sectors is important. The plan looks at sectors such as rubber, spices, processed foods and marine-based industries, as well as electronics, digital services, minerals, and auto components. It also rightly addresses the cross-cutting enablers that exporters need: logistics, trade processes, finance, standards, sustainability, skills, innovation, and market access. But the plan should also be used to address the practical constraints exporters face every day. Beyond sector promotion, this means reducing input costs and regulatory frictions, including through the gradual rationalization of tariffs. It means advancing faster and more digital trade processes, including the national single window, and it means expanding market access through free trade agreements and deeper regional integration. Other priorities will also matter: strengthening trade finance and working capital solutions, improving access to testing, certification, and standard services, building stronger market intelligence, branding support, and buyer links, and helping firms meet ESG requirements. Just as importantly, implementation will require stronger coordinations across export promotion, investment promotion, overseas missions, chambers, and the private sector. Export development cannot rely on promotion alone. It depends on predictable policies, capable institutions, coordinated implementation, and a competitive private sector. The launch of the NEDP is an important milestone, but the real test will be implementation. Export development takes steady reform over time. As they say, it is a marathon and not a sprint. And results will not come from one intervention or one institution alone. They will require consistent prioritization, policy coherence, and disciplined follow-through. Priorities will need to be sequenced, responsibilities will need to be clear, and progress will need to be monitored regularly. The NEDP should therefore be treated as a living platform, one that guides annual work planning, budget prioritization, development partner coordination, and public-private dialogue. ADB remains committed to supporting Sri Lanka's broader trade, investment, and industry reform agenda through policy-based lending, technical assistance, analytical work, policy dialogue, and capacity building. Our focus will remain on helping translate reform priorities into practical, measurable outcomes in partnership with the government, the private sector, and other development partners. Let me close by once again congratulating the government of Sri Lanka, the Ministry of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development, and the Export Development Board on the launch of the National Export Development Plan 2026 to 2030. ADB looks forward to continuing our partnership in support of a more competitive, diversified, and resilient Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you very much. Thank you, ADB, for the trust and confidence that you have placed in Sri Lanka. A big thank you to Madam Sharon Collin, the Country Director, Asian Development Bank. For any country to prosper and go forward, we need to have two very important characteristics or scenarios, and one is political stability and the other is economic stability. And Sri Lanka is definitely witnessing that in the present. And we're now to, in fact, showcase how the Sri Lanka Export Development Board takes Sri Lanka to the world. Have a look at the screen.
Authentic, sustainable, and confident. Sri Lanka holds the enormous potential to be a vital part of any global business. For centuries, this island has played a vital role in global trade as a destination for world-renowned products and services. Ceylon tea, bearing the iconic lion logo epitomizes Sri Lanka's global exports, celebrated for its ethical practices and superior quality, leaving a lasting impression on global tea connoisseurs. Coconut and coconut-based products. As a tropical island, Sri Lanka is no stranger to the multiple uses of coconut and is the world's fourth largest coconut exporter. Spices and concentrates. Sri Lanka, known as a spice island, offers a rich variety of spices, essential oils, and oil resins, notably specializing in Ceylon cinnamon for its exceptional fragrance and medicinal properties. The country also exports a diverse range of spices, including pepper, cloves, nutmeg, mace, cardamom, and more. Processed food and beverages. With an abundance of local ingredients, Sri Lanka's processed food and beverages industry is world renowned for taste and goodness. Seafood and aquaculture fishing has long been a part of this island's life, with a vibrant and bountiful variety of fish being exported from Sri Lanka's waters. Apparel and textiles. Trusted by some of the world's most iconic fashion brands, Sri Lanka's apparel industry has an unblemished reputation for ethical and sustainable manufacturing. Rubber and rubber-based products. Sri Lanka stands as a global leader in the production of natural rubber, renowned for its premium quality and long-lasting rubber goods. This eco-conscious industry prioritizes sustainability, actively combating carbon pollution through the cultivation of natural rubber. Electrical and electronic products. The island offers a diverse range of electrical and electronic services, driving automation, sustainable power, and digitalization of work and living spaces. Diamonds, gems, and jewelry. Sri Lanka has long been a treasure trove for precious gems and is still one of the 5 most important gem-bearing nations in the world. Ports and shipbuilding. Being an island located on major maritime routes, it's no surprise that Sri Lanka will play a role in regional maritime engineering, shipbuilding, and dry dock services. Ceramics, porcelain, and glass products. From Academy Awards to global summits, Sri Lanka's high-quality porcelain and ceramics have graced some of the world's most prestigious events. Information and communication technology. Sri Lankan ingenuity has long been celebrated for its nimble and innovative ICT solutions that are well ahead of their time. Logistics sector. Sri Lanka's strategic location and proximity to many emerging markets make it an ideal place for multi-country consolidation, value addition, re-exporting, and other logistics operations. Here in Sri Lanka, you will discover an abundance of uniquely specialized products, along with a lasting partnership that's agile and customized to your needs. We are more than just a service provider. We are an integral part of your journey to success. We are Sri Lanka, your wife.
That's how Sri Lanka shines bright in the world. And with that, we have come to the very important keynote address. And to deliver the keynote address, we invite the Minister of Labour, who's also the Deputy Minister of Finance and Planning, the Honourable Dr. Anil Jayanthan Fernando.
Honorable Minister of Industries and Entrepreneurship Development, Sunil Nandumetti, Deputy Minister, other ministers, and members of Parliament, the Governor of Central Bank, diplomatic representatives and other development partners, representative from the private sector, investors, exporters, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me congratulate the team, especially led by EDB, of launching the National Export Development Plan 2026-2030 with clear, actionable plans and strategies how best we navigate our export trajectory to achieve set goals within our government the plans and objectives. It is needless to talk about the significance of the international trade and the significance of exports. Everyone understands it. But sometimes there would be myths and misconception of exports as well. If you just ask simply about exports, every country wants to have more exports than imports. That is what everyone expects. Would that be a reality? No. All the countries in this world cannot have more exports than imports. It needs to be balanced. What matters is whether we are exporting or whether we have achieved our full potential of exports in a sustainable manner to connect with the global trade, to satisfy the needs of our people for our consumption, our production, and the global investments, borrowing, lending. So likewise it goes on, and the people are connected to a global economy. So that's the reality. And unlike in the past, some ideologies were there. We produce our goods and services according to our capacities, the material availability, competencies that we have developed, and to satisfy your needs. And on the other hand, there are some goods and services that you can't manufacture or produce. Then you import. One country manufactures and imports, exports and imports what they need. So this is the whole ecosystem of the world trade. Now it is gradually being changing. In fact, it has changed. It has come to a great level now. All are connected, and it is extremely difficult for sometimes to identify a particular good that has been purely manufactured or produced in one single country. It is connected to a global supply chain. I think though it is complex compared to the past, but on the other hand, it has created lots of potential for us to connect the world and continue with the global trade in a sustainable manner. If we have the correct approach, the connectivity and the transparency, the fairness in the global trade, in a way, a democratic application in the global trade. That is the reason why every year the global trade is increasing, since we are connected. I think the EDB under the Ministry of Industries and the Entrepreneurship Development has developed this particular plan to achieve this particular target. It is a fact that referring to our resources, our capabilities, the technology that we have not reached to our potential. The achievement in the export cannot be measured simply in terms of the value of exports. It has connection to some qualitative aspects as well. If you carefully look at the composition of our exports, mainly the merchandise, I saw one picture which was developed by one of the organization, as I remember, trade organization. The structure of Sri Lanka's exports in 1990s and 2020. The type of exports, the items or the categories are colored in that picture. When I compare the picture of our export composition of 1990 and 2020, more or less the same. More or less the same. It simply tells us that we have not diversified our exports based on our capacities and based on the global changes and the changes that have really created by the technology. So especially when it comes to the IT related industries and the supply chain, all those things are concerned, I think. So that is one of the areas. That could be one of the reasons why in our export development plan, the export diversification is a key, apart from the other strategies of improving our export income. This diversification comes from two angles. One is from the product diversification, other one is the market diversification. So all those things are well aligned with the government objectives. When we formed our government, one of the biggest challenges that we faced was none other than the stabilization. Because we knew this very well before forming our government, we are going to take over a government, the economy which was already crippled, it was really in an economic abyss. In such a situation, economic growth or the development, any other things are really miracles. First of all, we need the stabilization. That is the reason why in our manifesto, separate chapter was included on macroeconomic stabilization. I think in 2025, all the stakeholders, everyone, together with the government, ministries, official bureaucrats, worked with that particular objective. And from our side, we demonstrated the good governance. And we, to great extent, within this governance structure, we hope that within the political sphere, the corruption was almost removed. As a result, this stabilization took us to a level which was more than what we expected. As a result, 2025, we were able to record a growth rate of 5%. Unfortunately, we happened to face Dikwa cyclone in November, and again, we are facing the impact of the negative impact of the Middle East war. Even amidst these big challenges, now I am happy to announce that the Q1 2026 has already reported a growth rate of 5.1%. In fact, we are in a growth trajectory of 7% growth with inclusive and sustainable objectives. In a way, that objective has been a little bit compromised due to the current situation. However, it is that first quarter growth should be commendable, though that is lower than what we expected compared to the given situation. Relatively, it is significant, and after 2022, that is the highest first quarter growth after 2022. Apart from the technical aspect of export development plan, as far as the markets are concerned, products are concerned, other strategies, how this will move on, the investments are concerned, and the connection and the connectivity of investors and the connectivity of stakeholders. On the other hand, government is also supporting these strategies in many ways. Among them, the digitalization is one key area that would really facilitate for us to increase the efficiency on the one hand, but on the other hand, it will reduce the cost of production. That is one area we are trying hard on to achieve these targets. The other area is the quality of human capital. Sri Lanka is not rich of natural resources that much, but we are really rich of human resources. It doesn't mean that the number of people that we have, the qualities, capacities, and competencies, the abilities our people can generate is the human development capacity. It is proven in many areas, but we need to bring it to a kind of systematic framework together with appropriate educational reforms and the career guidances and other parts for human resource development. So therefore, we have taken that also as one of our strategies to develop human resources. So this capacity, human resource development capacity, really enhancement of the capacity of production. This is what we can excel. When we go to other areas, when we take raw materials, technology, all the other areas, everyone can easily access. The competition would not that be easy unless you have something exceptional, something is with tacit knowledge. All the other things can be easily traded in the market and acquired. But when it comes to the ability of human, that is area where we can have a competitive edge. We strongly believe this particular competitive edge. So the government is aligning this human resource development to align with your strategic plan. And the other area, it is also connected to the human resources, but it comes to the labor productivity and the labor market and labor laws and industrial relationships. We have faced a history of antagonization and confrontation industrial relations in the past. Now we are reforming our the legal framework. Some of the acts are very old, not really addressing the current situation. We may need to introduce new acts as well. And the cabinet appointed, as this our cabinet appointed an expert committee to look at these areas, and now the exercise is on. They are drafting a new law. Not everyone is concentrated in one particular law. Certain the rule, the acts, laws are amalgamated with the labor code. This will be, we hope that we would be able to launch this thing before the end of this year. The aim, so you would see, this would be really open for the public discourses very soon when experts can comment on this thing. The objective of these labor reforms is to create a conducive environment and a peaceful working environment in all the working places for the world of work. And meantime, we are complying with all the international standards and best practices. Step by step, we are moving because we need to get the consent. So good thing we observed. Once we formed our government, we were able to call National Labour Advisory Council, where both employers and employees are now cooperating and exchanging ideas together with the authorities. It is a kind of effective tripartite mechanism to improve the labor efficiency. We hope that that will create for Sri Lanka a peaceful production environment where the focus is not to first get the benefit, first to increase the productivity. How best we create more value, then value can be shared in a fair manner. So aim is to work together to have the benefits, the fair benefits of common prosperity. So let me conclude by thanking and appreciating all the works done by everyone in the ministry and the Export Development Board, headed by Mangalam Jayasinghe, for this the noble work of launching this particular plan that could be really converted into vibrant actions that would increase our exports to match with our imports and a live and vibrant and sustainable export mechanism for us to claim that we are well connected with the global trade that would pass the benefit to Sri Lankan and share with the shared prosperity. Thank you so much.
There was a lot of food for thought, and we say thank you to our keynote speaker, the Honorable Dr. Anil Jayanta Fernando, Minister of Labour and the Deputy Minister of Finance and Planning. Thank you very much to our keynote speaker. Alright, අද උත්සවයේ සුවිශේෂී අංගයකට අපිට වෙන්නේ අපගේ ප්‍රධාන ආරාධිත අමුත්තන් ගෞරවයෙන් ආරාධනා කරන මොහොතේදී කතාව සඳහා නම් ඊට කලින් පොහොසත් රට එහෙම නැත්නම් අපි ළඟින මේ ලස්සන ජීවිතය නිකම්ම අහසින් වැටෙන දෙයක් නෙමෙයි. එහෙම වැටෙන්නේ නැහැ. එහෙම ඔබ ඒ සිහිනේ දකිනවා නම් ඒ සඳහා අපි වැඩ කළ යුතුයි. So we need to have plans. අපිට අවශ්‍යයි සැලසුම, අපිට අවශ්‍යයි ක්‍රියාමාර්ග. ඉතින් මේක හොඳ නිදසුනක්. NEDP කියන plan එක සැලසුම හොඳ නිදසුනක්. අපි මේ දකින සිහිනය පොහොසත් රට සහ ලස්සන ජීවිතය තව තවත් අප ඉදිරියේ අත්දැකීම්. Alright, so giving up in the we are about to invite our chief guest to address the gathering, who is the Minister of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development. Apagi Gauri Aradhane Karmat Sa Vivasa Kat Samwadana Amatumani Gauru Sunil Halimati Mahatmadai Amatumadai Gauri Aradhane.
Harga saya pamatan si bagi saudara mati, dia jamaat kita terang habis ini, amat kumani, mahal kerja kumani, apa amatan si beroleh kantunya kita kerja sumber kantunya ni, excellencies, bagaimana wan di mana ni orang ni kena sumber lagi, saya apa nak karuan sumber lagi, apa nak salas menerima kiri ni beri modal apa sampai aku. අපනයන සංවර්ධන මණ්ඩලයේ සභාපතිතුමාට කාර්ය මණ්ඩලයේ හඳුනාගින් අවසරයි. අපරාධ සුබ සන්ධ්‍යාව. අද අපේ රටේම විශේෂ දවසක්. සලස්මත් නැතුව ගමනක් කියපු රටක්. ඉතා කෙටි කාලයක් තුළ එකට ඒකාබද්ධව වැඩ කරන්න, සලස්මකට වැඩ කරන්න, ක්‍රමවේද වලට වැඩ කරන්න පුරුදු පුහුණු කරගෙන ඉන්න ඉතාම අමාරුයි. නමුත් අපේ රජය සමත් වෙලා තියෙනවා අවුරුදු එකමාරක කෙටි කාලයක් තුළ ජාතික ප්‍රතිපත්ති, ජාතික සැලසුම්, ක්‍රමවේද එක වැඩ කරනවා. අද අපේ රටේ ජනතාව අපේ රජයේ බලයට පත් කිරීමෙන් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙච්ච ප්‍රධානම කටයුත්තක් තමයි පිළිවෙලකට සැලැස්මකට විනිවිද භාවයෙන් යුතුව රට විස්තාර ගමන ගෙනියන. විශේෂයෙන්ම අපි බලයට ආවට පස්සේ ජාත්‍යන්තර වශයෙන් යුදමය තත්ත්වයක් අපේ රට තුළට බලපාපු විත්වා සුලිකුණාර තත්ත්වයක් තුල අද අපි සමත් වෙලා තියෙනවා අපේ ආර්ථිකය විස්තාර ගමනක් ගෙනියන. රටේ දේශපාලන ස්ථාවරත්වයේ ආර්ථික ස්ථාවරත්වයට අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම වැදගත් තමයි. මම හිතන්නේ අද අපේ ආර්ථික ස්ථාවරත්වය පිළිබඳව ජාත්‍යන්තර ප්‍රජාවට, අපේ ව්‍යාපාරික ප්‍රජාවට, අපනයන කරුවන්ට විශ්වාසයක් ගොඩනැගලා තියෙනවා. ඒ විශ්වාසයේ පදනම තමයි අප තුළ තියෙන සාමූහිකත්වය. තීන්දුව ගැනීම විතරක් නෙමෙයි, ඒ තීන්දුව తీරන ක්‍රියාවට නැගීමේදී එකට සාමූහිකව කටයුතු කරනවා. අද මේ 2026-2030 ජාතික අපනයන සංවර්ධන සැලැස්ම ඉදිරිපත් කරන වෙලාවේ අපේ කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලයේ මේ සැලැස්මට ඍජුවම දායක වන රවිඩි කර්මාන්ත අමාත්‍යවරයා, දීවරහ ජලජ සම්පත් අමාත්‍යවරයා, ඒ වගේම ඩිජිටල් ඉකොනොමි අමාත්‍යතුමා, ඒ වගේම කම්කරුහා මුදල් නියෝජ්‍ය අමාත්‍යතුමා, පාර්ලිමේන්තු මන්ත්‍රීවරු අද මෙතන ඉන්නවා. ඒ අපේ ශක්තියක්. අපි සාමූහික වැඩ කිරීමේ ප්‍රතිඵලයක්. විශේෂයෙන්ම මම ඉතාම සන්තෝෂ වෙනවා කර්මාන්ත අමාත්‍යවරයා හැටියට මේ කාර්තුව 2026 අපි ආරම්භ කරනකොටම එක පැත්තකින් අපේ ආර්ථික වර්ධන වේගය 5.1ක පවත් ගන්නත් අපේ ආර්ථික වර්ධන වේගයේ සංයුක්තිය තුළ මෑත කාලේ ඉතාමත්ම කෙටි කාලයක් තුළ සේවා ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨය අභිබව කර්මාන්ත ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨයේ දායකත්වය 7.2ක තත්ත්වයකට ගේන්න ලැබී. මොකද අපි දන්නවා අපේ රට කෘෂිකාර්මික කර්මාන්ත මූලයන් තිබුණාට පහුගිය දශක ගණනාවම සේවා ආර්ථිකයේ මත තමයි අපේ ආර්ථිකයේ ඉපයීම් පදනම් වුනේ. සේවා ආර්ථිකයේ පවතින ඕන. ඒ සේවා ආර්ථිකයේ පවතින ඕන හැම තියෙන්නේ කර්මාන්ත කෘෂි කර්මාන්තයේ වර්ධනය වීමේ වේගයත් එක්ක සේවා ආර්ථිකයේ පැවැත්ම තියෙන්නේ කර්මාන්තවල පැවැත්ම තියෙන්නේ ඒකාබද්ධ වීම. නියෝජ්‍යමාත්තුමා වගේම මේ අගේ දාමේ මේ වැලියු චේන් එකේ අපේ කර්මාන්ත වලට විශාල කටයුත්තක් තියෙනවා අපි අපනයන ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨය වර්ධනය කරන්න. ගෝලීය වශයෙන් අපිට තියෙන ස්ථානය අපි හරියට අඳුරගෙන තියෙනවා. ඉතින් මේ නව සංවර්ධන සැලැස්ම ජාතික අපනයන සංවර්ධන සැලැස්ම අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා 2030 වෙනකොට ඩොලර් බිලියන 36ක අපනයන ආර්ථිකයක් කරා යන්න අපට මඟ පෙන්වනවා. විශේෂයෙන් මෙහි මූලික අත්විවරම අද අපි වෙනකොට මේ ආර්ථිකය සකස් කරමින් ඉන්නවා. අපේ අධිවේගී මාර්ග පද්ධතිය දියුණු කිරීම, ආර්ථිකයේ අවශ්‍ය කරන යටිකල පහසුකම් සම්පාදනය කිරීම, අපේ අපනයන කරුවන්ට අවශ්‍ය කරන ඉඩම් පහසුකම් ලබා දීම, ඒ වගේම වැදගත්ම දේ තමයි ප්‍රමාද වලින් තොරව, රස්තියාදු වීම වලින් තොරව අපි අපනයන වෙනුවෙන් සහ කර්මාන්ත වෙනුවෙන් අවශ්‍ය කරන පහසුකම් ලබා දීම අපි වෙනුවෙන් දැරිව කැප වෙලා තියෙනවා. විශේෂයෙන්ම අපට පහුගිය දවසේ පුළුවන් වුණා ජාතික khනිජ සම්පත් පිළිබඳ ප්‍රතිපත්තිය කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලයේ අනුමත කරලා පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ ඉදිරිපත් කරන්නේ. අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා අපේ රටේ khනිජ සම්පත් අපේ අපනයන ආර්ථිකයේ විශාල පංගුවක් නියෝජනය කරන්න ඕන. අද අපේ අපනයන ආර්ථිකය තුළ khනිජ සම්පත් තුළ දායකත්වයේ තියෙන 105කට වඩා අඩුයි. නමුත් අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා අපේ හැකියාව අපේ ඉඩකඩ ලෝකයේ තුල අපේ khනිජ සම්පත් වලට තියෙන තැන විශේෂයෙන්ම අගේ එකතු කරන්න පුළුවන් හැකියාව ඊට වඩා වැඩි. ඒ නිසා මම මේ විශේෂ අවස්ථාවේ අපේ දේශීය කර්මාන්තකරුවන් දේශීය ආයෝජකයින් ආරාධනා කරනවා අපේ රටේ khනිජ සම්පත් ශේෂ්ත්‍රයේ ආයෝජන වලට ඔබ පැමිණෙන්න. අපි මේ වන විට කහටගහ පතල ග්‍රැෆයිට් වලට ආයෝජන කරනවා තියෙනවා. එපාවල ප්‍රොස්පෙක්ට් අගේ වැඩි කිරීමේ අවසාන අධ්‍යයනයේ අපි ආයෝජන කරවීම සම්පූර්ණ කරමින් ඉන්නවා. ඒ වගේම කුල්මුණේ කණ්ඩිවැල් නිදිය ඇතුළු තියෙන ඒ කණ්ඩි සම්පත් වලින් නම ආයෝජන කරනවා තියෙනවා. ඒ සියල්ලම විශේෂයෙන්ම අපි සලකා බලන්නේ රටේ අපනයන ආර්ථිකය විවිධාංගීකරණය සහිතව ශක්තිමත් කිරීම. අපේ අමාත්‍යාංශ විතරක් නෙමෙයි කර්මාන්ත පැවිදි කර්මාන්ත අමාත්‍යාංශයේ සංචාරක කර්මාන්ත ඒකාබද්ධ කරලා සිලෝන් ටී ප්‍රවර්ධන වැඩසටහනක් ආරම්භ කරලා තියෙනවා ඉදිරි කාලය තුල. ඒ වගේම අපනයන ශිෂ්ටයට අපටම තියෙන අනන්තතාවයක් සහිත දැවිලි භෝග ජාත්‍යන්තර වෙළඳපොළට ගෙනියන්න අගයක කරන්න පැවිදි කර්මාන්ත අමාත්‍යාංශය සහ අපි ඒකාබද්ධ වැඩ කරනවා. දීවර අමාත්‍යාංශයත් එක්ක අපි ඒකට ගොඩාක් වැඩ කරනවා. අපේ තියෙන මුහුදු ආහාර, මුහුදු ජීවි, මුහුදු බැලෑට අපි අපනයන ආර්ථිකයේ වැඩි පංගුවක් දායක කරගන්න. ඒ විතරක් නෙවෙයි අපි කල්පනා කරගෙන ඉන්නවා අද අපි ජනාධිපතිතුමාත් එක්ක සාකච්ඡා කළා ආනයන ආදේශන කර්මාන්ත දුරු කිරීම සහ ඔවුන්ට අතදීම තුලින් අපේ ඩොලර් ආදායම ඉතිරි කරන්න. ඩොලර් ආදායම ඉතිරි කිරීමත් ආදායම ඉපයීමත් අපි සලකන එක හා සමානම වැදගත්කමක් තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම අපේ ශේෂ්ඨ ගණනාවක් තියෙනවා අපරම අනන්‍ය වේ. ඔටෝමොබයිල්, component manufacturing, mineral related industries, spices, apparel industry එක අපේ විශේෂ දායකත්වයක් සපයනවා. මේ හැම ශේෂ්ඨයක් ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ ලාංකීය අනන්‍යතාවයේ සහිතව ජාත්‍යන්තර වෙළඳපොළ අත්පත් කර ගැනීම තමයි අපේ බලාපොරොත්තුව. ඒ වෙනුවෙන් තමයි මේ අපනයන සංගම් සලස්ව අපි ඉලක්ක කළේ. ඒ වගේම තමයි නව ගෝලීය තත්ත්වයන් යටතේ ලෝකයේ ඇතිවලා තියෙන යුදමය වාතාවරණය යටතේ අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා විශේෂයෙන්ම යුරෝපයේ රටවල් වගේම යුරෝපයේ මැදපෙරදිග වෙළඳපොළවල් වලින් වගේම දකුණු ආසියාවේ ආසියා පැසිෆික් කලාපයේ නව වෙළඳපොළක් අපිට තියෙනවා. අපේ අපනයන වලට තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම අපේ රටට ආයෝජන කරලා ගැනීමේදී අපිට නව වෙළඳපොළක් තියෙනවා. මොකද අපි දන්නවා අද හුඟක් දෙනෙක් තරකා බලන දෙයක් තමයි නිෂ්පාදන පිරිවැය. ප්‍රවාහන වියදම්. ඒ නිෂ්පාදන පිරිවැය ප්‍රවාහන වියදම් වලදී අපි හිතනවා අපේ පිහිටීම රටක් හැටියට භූදේශපාලනීය වශයෙන් අපට තියෙන පිහිටීම අතිශය වැදගත් ආයෝජන කැඳවන්න. ඒ නිසා අපි මේ වන විට ඒ වෙනුවෙන් විදේශ දානාපති සේවාවන් සමග අපේ රට නියෝජනය කරමින් විදේශ රටවල් වල ඉන්න දානාපතිවරු සමග විශේෂ සාකච්ඡාවකට ගණනාවක්ම පවත්වලා තියෙනවා. මම අවසාන වශයෙන් කියන්න කැමතියි අපිට නිහතමානී සතුටක් තියෙනවා. අපි මේක අවුරුදු එකහමාරකට කලින් මෙරටේ පාලන බලය ලබා ගන්න වෙලාවේ ආර්ථික විශේෂඥයින් එවකට රට පාලනය කරපු පාලකීන් පැවසුවේ මේ ආර්ථිකය හදන්න 2048 වලතුරු ඉන්න ඕන. ඒ වගේම සමහර අය කිව්වේ මේ ආර්ථිකේ ණය ගෙවන්න නම් අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම තියෙන රාජ්‍ය ව්‍යාපාර රාජ්‍ය සම්පත් විකුණන්න ඕන. ඒ විකුණන්න ඕන තියපු රාජ්‍ය සම්පත් විශේෂයෙන් ශ්‍රී ලංකන් ගුවන් සේවය ඒ වගේම බොහෝ වරාය බොහෝ ආයතන අපි විකිණීම පැත්තකින් තියලා ප්‍රතිවිරුද්ධකරණය කිරීම සහ ප්‍රතිසංස්කරණ වලින් සාර්ථක ප්‍රතිඵල ලබා ගන්න පුළුවන්. නායකත්වය විනය ඒ වගේම විනිවිද භාග විශ්වාසනීයත්වය ගොඩනගනවා කියලා අපි පිළිගන්නවා. ඒ නිසා විශේෂයෙන්ම පාඩු ලබන රාජ්‍ය ව්‍යාපාර අපි දාපලවත් කියනවා. ඒ වගේම බොහෝ ආයතන වල අපි ඒකාබද්ධ කිරීම කරලා තියෙනවා. අපේ බලාපොරොත්තුව තමයි අපනයන සංවර්ධන මණ්ඩලයක් කර්මාන්ත ව්‍යවසායකත්ව අමාත්‍යාංශය අපේ ඒකායන අධිෂ්ඨානය තමයි රටේ කර්මාන්ත අභිවෘද්ධිය වෙනුවෙන් අපනයන ආර්ථිකය වෙනුවෙන් පහසුකම් සැලසීම. ඉතින් මම නියෝජිත මුදල් අමාත්‍යමාණන් මේ වෙලාවට ඉල්ලා හිටිනවා. පිටා ඉක්මනින්ම මේ අපනයන සලස්ම සාර්ථක කරන්න නම් අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම ඉන්වෙස්ට්මන්ට් ෆැසිලිටේෂන් කමිටි එක පිටවන්න ඕන. සිංගල් වින්ඩෝ සිස්ටම් එක මම හිතනවා අපිට මේ අවුරුද්ද අවසාන වෙනකොට දෙයක් ගන්න පුළුවන් කියනවා. ඒ වගේම ඩිජිටල් කරන පහසුකම් අපි රාජ්‍ය ව්‍යාපාර වලට රාජ්‍ය ආයතන වලට ලබා දීලා තියෙනවා. ඒක පෞද්ගලික අංශයටත් ඒ පහසුකම් ලබා දීලා මේ ඒකාබද්ධ කිරීමෙන් මේ සරස්ම අපට ඉතාම ප්‍රායෝගිකව ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න පුළුවන්. අදින් ඔබ අතරපත් වෙන මේ අපරාධ සංවර්ධන සරස්ම දිහා බලන්න ඉතාම ප්‍රායෝගිකයි. අපේ ඉලක්ක ඉතාම ප්‍රායෝගිකයි. අපි අද ඉලක්ක තුල ඉන්නවා. විශේෂයෙන් මේ 2026 අවුරුද්දේ අපි අපරාධ සරස්මේ ඩොලර් බිලියන 20ක් අපි ඉලක්ක කරලා තියෙනවා. බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන ඩොලර් බිලියන 20 ඉලක්කයට යන්න පුළුවන්. පළවෙනි කාර්යය අපි දැන් ඩොලර් බිලියන 4.5ක ආදායමක් පෙරලා තියෙනවා. අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා ඩොලර් බිලියන 20 ඉලක්කය අපිට සම්පූර්ණ කරන්න පහසු වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ නිසා අපි ඉලක්ක සාගත ඒ ඉලක්ක වෙනුවෙන් හඹා යන්නේ ඒ සඳහා ඔබගේ සම්පූර්ණ සමගිය දායකත්වය ලබා ගැනීම කටයුතු කරනවා. අවසාන වශයෙන් ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙනවා. I am thankful ADB team you have given a full support to us. අතන මේ ආසියානු සම්බන්ධ බැංකුවේ සම්පූර්ණ තාක්ෂණික සහයෝගය අපිට නැතුව මේ කටයුතු සාර්ථක කරන්න බෑ. ඒ නිසා විශේෂයෙන්ම අපේ රටේ ඉන්න ආසියානු සම්බන්ධ බැංකුවේ කන්ට්‍රි ඩිරෙක්ටර් ඔබතුමියට ඔබේ කණ්ඩායමට අපි ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙනවා. ඒ වගේම අපිට පුජ්‍යලයේ විශේෂණ තිබා ඇත්තා. හැබැයි පුජ්‍යලයේ කැපවීම විශේෂයි. ඕනම දෙයක් සාර්ථක කරන්න පුජ්‍යලික කැපවීම අති විශේෂයි. මේ කැපවීමේදී මම හිතන්නේ මෑත යුගයේ අපනයන කරුවන් හැටියට ඔබ සියලු දෙනාම පිළිගන්නවා අපේ අපනයන සංවර්ධන මණ්ඩලයට ඉදිරිපත් කරලා ඉන්න ස්වේච්ඡාවෙන්ම කටයුතු කරන අපේ සභාපති මංගල විජේසිංහ මැතිතුමා සහ අධ්‍යක්ෂක මණ්ඩලය ඒ වුන්ගේ කැපකිරීම මේ අවස්ථාවේදී මම විශේෂයෙන්ම අගය කොට සලකනවා. අපි අමාත්‍යාංශයේ හැමදාම කියනවා වගේ ඉන්ඩස්ට්‍රි ෆැමිලි කර්මාන්ත පවුලක් හැටියට කටයුතු කරනවා. ඒක තමයි අපේ මේ සාර්ථකත්වයේ රහස. ලේකම්තුමිය අපේ අමාත්‍යාංශයේ සියලු දෙනාටම ඒ වගේම මේ අවස්ථාවට සහභාගී වෙන හැම දෙනාටම මගේ ගෞරවය ස්තුතිය පළ කරමින් මම අදහස් දැක්වීම අවසන් කරනවා. බොහොම ස්තුතියි.
Okay, thank you to our chief guest, the Honorable Sunil Hanunethi, the Minister of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development. So, ladies and gentlemen, Sri Lanka Export Development Board of Sri Lanka EDB is proud and is ready, humbly proud and ready for the official launch of the National Export Development Plan 2026-2030, Sri Lanka's national roadmap for export transformation developed through extensive stakeholder consultation and aligned with national development priorities. Well, the NEDB sets the strategic direction for achieving export-led growth, enhancing competitiveness, diversifying exports products and markets, and also creating a resilient export economy for the next 5 years. So get ready. We have come to that very special moment of launching this plan, officially launching this plan. So this is what's going to happen. The plan will be officially launched by our chief guest. So what we're going to do is we'll be requesting the chairman and the chief executive officer of Sri Lanka Export Development Board, Mr. Mangal Vijayasinghe, to accompany the Honorable Sunil Hanunethi to the front area, and we'll be providing you a tablet as we request the Honorable Minister to do the honors by placing your palm on the tablet, and thereafter we're going to have the launch. Later on we'll be having the official photo, but firstly the Honorable Minister will be placing his palm. Badai charu shilpi shilpiyan da punya awasthawa hadala denawa. Badai amatyatumaa natin nila washayen Jatika Pradhan Sanwardhana Sanasma 2026 Nila Washen Ida Pune Mahota. Have a look at the screen, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Honorable Minister. Thank you, the others. You may take your seats. Have a look at the screen. Keep looking at the screen. Just keep watching the screen because we have a very important document, and we have the pages that are scrolling. Lot of planning, lot of strategizing, and that's the document, ladies and gentlemen. We have a big round of applause for the National Export Development Plan 2026-30. Yeah, you got that all important QR code as well, and with the scan of that QR code, you can get that huge document, huge book into your smart device that can be done. Right. And by the way, don't panic because in your docket, the QR code is printed. So even if you can't capture the QR code at this moment, don't panic because your docket will have the QR code. You can conveniently download the QR code onto your device. And now we're going to have the official handover of the first copies of the book, of the plan, and that's going to happen right now, together with the official program as well. So we can invite a couple of very special dignitaries on stage. For this purpose, we invite our chief guest, the Honorable Sunil Hanunethi, Minister of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development. We also invite the Honorable Samanth Vidyartha, Minister of Plantation and Community Infrastructure. We also invite the Honorable Ramalingam Chandrasekhar, Minister of Fisheries, Aquatic and Ocean Resources, and also the Honorable Dr. Anil Jayanta Fernando, Minister of Labour and Deputy Minister of Finance and Planning. We also invite Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, the Honorable Chaturanga Abhisinha, the Deputy Minister of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development. We also invite the Honorable Kumar Jayapuri as well, and also the Honorable Iranga Veeratna, the Deputy Minister of Digital Economy, also on the stage. And we also invite Dr. Hans Vijay Surya, Advisor to His Excellency the President, Madam Dilma Jaswant, Secretary to the Minister of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development, Dr. Harshan Surya Perwal, Secretary to Treasury and Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, Madam Shannon Collin, Country Director of the ADB, Mr. Mangal Vijay Singh, Chairman and CEO of EDB, and Mr. Erandika Disanag, Acting Director General of EDB, and Madam Kumdini Budalagi, the Additional Director General Development of the EDB. So, we have a big party on stage, and what's going to happen now is, ladies and gentlemen, the chairman hands over the first copy to our chief guest. That's the first copy being presented to our chief guest. And now, the copies will be presented to the other dignitaries on stage as well by the chairman. Come on, dear audience, you need to applaud, and this is a very special moment, not only for us, but for the entire Sri Lanka as well. And this is how Sri Lanka will be taken to the world in a more strategized fashion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we need you to remain on stage because we are now going to request you to kindly keep posing for that very important group photograph that we're going to take right now. Thank you, Chief Guest, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you to all our guests on stage. What a great day. What a great day. So, the National Export Development Plan 2026-30 has been officially launched, and your dockets will have the QR code. You too can download that to your smart device. Thank you very much to all the dignitaries on stage. Thank you. You may take your seats. And now, since we have officially launched this document, officially launched this plan, let's get a little closer to this plan, and we want you to have a look at the screen right now.
Sri Lanka is moving towards a stronger export-driven future. The National Export Development Plan 2026 to 2030, developed by the Sri Lanka Export Development Board with the support of the Asian Development Bank and endorsed by the Cabinet of Ministers, provides a clear roadmap for economic transformation. Our vision is to position Sri Lanka as a competitive logistics and knowledge-intensive export hub, serving regional and global markets. The plan focuses on trade facilitation, logistics, investment reforms, market access, quality standards, innovation, entrepreneurship, and skills development. Together, government and private sector stakeholders will work towards one ambitious goal: achieving $36 billion in export earnings by 2030. The National Export Development Plan 2026 to 2030, driving growth, expanding exports, building Sri Lanka's future.
All right, the message is very, very clear, and on that we pretty glad. And we have another round of applause. Wishing this man all the very best, but this is also dependent on how we collaborate and get together. We have a short presentation on the plan as we invite Madam Kumudini Mudalike, the Additional Director General Developments for the Sri Lanka Export Development Board. Let's welcome Madam Kumudini Mudalike.
Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, representatives of the development partners, exporters, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a great pleasure for me to do a brief presentation on National Export Development Plan 26-2030, the landmark national framework that will guide Sri Lanka's export transformation over the next 5 years. Ladies and gentlemen, the NDDP is built around a bold national vision. Sri Lanka, a competitive logistics and knowledge-intensive export hub serving national and global markets. By 2030, we expect Sri Lanka becoming the leading trade and logistics hub in the Indian Ocean, supported by a competitive, innovative, and knowledge-driven export economy. The plan directly supports the government's ambition to increase exports significantly and strengthen Sri Lanka's integration into the global and regional value chains. The strategic framework focuses on 5 major outcomes: diversifying our export basket beyond traditional markets, traditional exports, strengthening Sri Lanka's position as a logistics and transshipment hub, deepening regional and global economic integration, improving the overall trade and investment climate. Finally, nurturing an innovative and entrepreneurial private sector capable of driving high-value export growth. Together, these outcomes will help create more resilient and globally competitive economy. One of the greatest strengths of the NEDP is the inclusive and participatory manner in which it was developed. The formulation process commenced in July 2025 and involved research and extensive consultations with stakeholders across the country. Diagnostic consultations were conducted in Colombo, Kandy, to understand the challenges faced by the stakeholders, exporters, and regional businesses. Sector-focused bilateral consultations were held to identify export opportunities, emerging market trends, and sector-specific barriers. This process brought together the government institutions, private sector associations, exporters, chambers, development partners, academia, and industry experts. Subsequently, the draft plan of action was validated with the implementing agencies and private sector organizations. The final plan was received cabinet approval on 4th May 2026. Therefore, the NDDP is not simply a document, it is a national plan developed through a broad stakeholder consultation, ownership, and agreement. The cross-sector enablers, the most important part of the plan, provide the foundational framework for strengthening Sri Lanka export competitiveness across all priority sectors. They focus on key areas including logistics and integrated hub operations, trade facilitation, trade finance and investment ecosystem development, trade promotion and market access, quality infrastructure and ESG compliance, and skills development, innovation and entrepreneurship. Together, these enablers create an integrated support system that reduces constraints, enhances capabilities, and drives export diversification and sustainable long-term growth. Ladies and gentlemen, while the NEDP contains economy-wide reforms, it also prioritizes sectors with highest export growth potential. 8 priority sectors have been identified based on competitiveness, market opportunities, value addition potential, and also future growth prospects. As you can see in the slide, auto components, mineral-based industries, rubber-based industries, processed food and beverages, spices, concentrates, electrical and electronic components, marine-based industries, including boat and shipbuilding, and digital products and services. Those are the 8 priority sectors. These sectors represent a deliberate balance between traditional strengths and also emerging industries. They will help Sri Lanka move towards higher value manufacturing, knowledge-intensive services, innovation-driven exports, and stronger participation in global value chains. Importantly, these sectors also offer significant opportunities for SME participation, regional development, technology transfer, and investment attraction. Dear ladies and gentlemen, the NEDP translates vision into action through a comprehensive plan of action consisting of 103 interventions to be implemented by 32 organizations. These interventions are organized under 6 strategic objectives, and this slide shows the number of lead implementers and the supporting implementers for the actions of each strategic objectives. Collectively, these pillars create the ecosystem necessary for export competitiveness and sustainable growth. Ladies and gentlemen, experience has shown that strategy alone is not enough. Successful implementation requires a strong governance, accountability, and institutional coordination. Therefore, the NEDP introduces a robust implementation mechanism. The Export Development Council of Ministers, EDCM, chaired by His Excellency the President of Sri Lanka, will provide national leadership for the implementation. The EDCM will be supported by the NEDP Steering Committee, which will coordinate implementation across agencies. The Export Development Board will serve as the NEDP Secretariat. A dedicated project management unit, PMU, establishing the EDB will oversee implementation, monitoring, reporting, stakeholder engagement, and performance management. The framework also leverages national mechanisms such as the National Trade Facilitation Committee, National Tariff Policy Committee, Investment Facilitation Committee, and the advisory committees established under the EDB Act. The whole of government approach ensures that implementation remains coordinated and accountable and results-oriented. Ladies and gentlemen, implementation of the NEDP has already initiated. The Export Development Board has proactively initiated several priority interventions under the NEDP. To support these efforts, the EDB has already earmarked an initial allocation of 250 million rupees for the year 1 implementation, that is for 2026, which demonstrates the government commitment to moving quickly from planning to delivery. Looking ahead, 4 immediate priorities will guide implementation. operationalization of governance structures, including the project management unit, steering committee, and monitoring system. Aligning implementing agencies so that NEDP priorities are embedded within annual institutional action plans. Undertaking organizational restructuring and strengthening within the export development work to enhance its effectiveness as the focal point. Mobilizing technical assistance and development partner support to strengthen implementation, management and reform window. Together we can transform Sri Lanka export sector into a dynamic engine of national prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, national export development is a national commitment, a commitment to competitiveness, a commitment to innovation, a commitment to sustainability. Altogether, a commitment to creating export-led future for Sri Lanka. Thank you very much.
We say thank you to Madam Kumudini Durge, the Additional Director General of Development for the Sri Lanka Export Development Board. And we are now getting ready to be setting the stage for a very interesting, engaging, and also insightful panel discussion. So, the theme, Headwinds and Horizons, operationalizing the NEDP for Sri Lanka's exporters. So that's our panel discussion topic. And we'll be having a moderator who will be taking his seat, and also we'll be having a couple of very eminent personalities occupying as panelists. So we have the pleasure of inviting shortly the ADB consultant for the Asian Development Bank, Mr. Anuj Chaudhary. Anuj is the founder and the CEO, Chief Executive Officer of Athak Advisory LLP, a consulting firm specializing in economic development, trade competitiveness and investment strategy across emerging markets. And he brings nearly 2 decades of experience working with governments, multilateral institutions, and also private sector clients as well, with engagements across South Asia, Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Africa. His work focuses on translating policy diagnostics into actionable implementation and delivering measurable outcomes in complex operation environments. So he will be our moderator. So we invite Mr. Anuj Chaudhary to take his place on stage. And welcome, let's put our hands together for our moderator. And I would like to mention the names of our panelists, which will comprise of the Honorable Chaturanga Abhisinga, Deputy Minister of Industry and Entrepreneurship Development. We'll be also having Mr. Mangal Vijayasinghe, Chairman and CEO of Sri Lanka Export Development Board. We also will be inviting Madam Nithya Mukhtar, the Senior Public Sector Economist for the Asian Development Bank, Mr. Ravi Dadlani, the Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer of Siat Karani Holdings Private Limited, and Mr. Dilhan Sifrando, Chairman of Dilma, a Ceylon Tea Company PLC. Gentlemen, can we warmly invite you on stage? Well, our program says the panel discussion is 1 hour and 15 minutes, but we will leave it to the moderator to decide, since we are a little bit behind schedule. We'll see how insightful this will definitely be. And we invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy. And just to let you know that we have a QR code that you can use to channel your questions to the moderator as well. So you can use the QR code to focus your questions to the moderator as well. Over to you, sir, Mr. Chaudhary.
Thank you, and good afternoon, rather good evening, everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion on Horizon and Headwinds, operationalizing the NEDP. Maybe just to set up a context for everyone, I think a lot of the dignitaries have spoken since the afternoon that global trade uncertainties has had its highest, right? And at this stage, ambition alone is not enough. So the way that we want to structure this discussion is, now we have this ambitious we have this ambitious target, but what do we do in operationalizing NEDP? So what are the challenges exporter community is facing, and then what is the actions that in fact, the whole of the government that needs to take to achieve these targets. We also have a QR code, like our MC said that we would like the participants, also the audience, to send some of their feedback and questions for the panel as well. We'll try and include those questions as we move into the discussion. So perhaps, having set this context, maybe so I'll start with you. Government of Sri Lanka has set up this really ambitious export target of $36 billion. Given the current environment, how realistic do you think this target is, and what are the 2 or 3 headwinds that the exporters must be wary about in this current economic environment?
Thank you very much. And again, if I start with what you initially mentioned, so what we really need to do is put our head down and execute this book. Because what's been said there is the demands of the exporters and the stakeholders for decades. And I think the entire outcome that what we are going to see is out of the implementation of such a majority of those actions. And for a government to have ambitious target, it is very important to have ambitious target, because that's what's going to drive everybody, not only the government but also the exporters and the officials, that your dream has to be big enough to chase. And I don't think 36 billion is a big target, because if you really look at the sectors that we were mentioning, we are seeing almost a 50 to 20% growth for certain sectors. So if you just extrapolate it, we would get about a 30 billion. So the additional 5 billion is going to come from the diversification and the sectors that's going to drive change. So when I say drive change, there is only 2 ways we can go about it. One is that, the capacity that we have in terms of raw material and input is limited. So only way forward is to allowing raw material to come in and improving the supply chain from the existing exporters' perspective. The other piece is attracting the right FDIs that's going to access the rest of the market. So I think these are the 2 main game changers that's going to take us there. But in order to do that is what the framework now talks about, even to attract FDIs that is export-led, even to double the capacity of the existing raw material base we have, we need to implement these changes. So the question about the global uncertainty, I think it has always been there. 2008 we faced it, and then there was a portion of such in 2015 to 19, and now again there's another noise about it. But if you really look at it, the consumers are changing and consumers are demanding what's required. So whatever the impact that or turbulences that will get will be temporary. So that is our view as a government, and so we just navigate the short term, but in the longer run, the important is that how do we connect to the growing markets. Now we do have access to Europe and US, but that doesn't mean that we will thrive there. So especially the East Asia, Africa and India and the Middle East has to be the next markets that we penetrate into. And from a global trade perspective, I think as much as we integrate into the value chain and the global investments are part of the ecosystem, we wouldn't we would be able to navigate through the turbulences that come.
Just as a follow-up question, what are the 2 or 3 challenges that you feel that the exporters are going to face in this environment?
So at the moment, the challenges will be the unpredictable nature of certain economies, because sometimes we've been very clear that we were going by the World Trade Organization and the trade rules, and sometimes it changed in certain economies, and it also depends on how the political sphere works. So I think that is the biggest challenge for our exporters at this point, and not only as exporters but as a country as a whole, the ability to predict So that is why it is important that we get into proper agreements with each of these economies to avoid that uncertainty. The second piece is how fast Sri Lanka will figure out its energy issue. So I think that is where we will get a significant competitive advantage as we move into renewable. Our cost of energy can be further reduced, which still at the moment hinders our exporters' competitiveness. Thirdly, the challenge is how do you get our institutional structures to support exports. I think this has been the topic of itself, and that is why this particular roadmap not only going to solve this problem. On the other side, we are creating an economic system that supports SMEs and the entrepreneurship for transformation. Digital ministry is driving the digital transformation, so that is where the single windows and the trade facilitation will come into play. Transport ministry is working very hard on getting our logistics competitiveness high. So if you really look at these 3 or 4 components, will continue to be a struggle for export. And I agree with, we understand that it's the current state, but collectively we will have to navigate these challenges, at least in the short term.
Thank you, sir. Maybe I'll move over to the chairman. First of all, congratulations for the culmination of this NEDP, at least in the strategy part. And I understand that this is a fairly consultative exercise. And I remember during the consultations, one of the feedback that the private sector always gave was Sri Lanka is known as a land of midnight gazettes. There is this policy and predictability that's happened, right? So, and even the question that we are getting on the QR code is that we've been here before. There has been an export strategy in the past. So what is, from your perspective, what is going to be the difference this time? What are the things EDB is going to do to ensure that some of these actions that are there in the strategy are actually going to be implemented?
Thank you, Anuj. And first of all, we want to mention that the support of Ministry of Industries and Development and the Sri Lanka government, we were able to launch the National Export Development Plan 26-2030. So we are very much clear that we have very good ambitious target. So I streamline all the cost-enabled sectors and the priority sectors as well. And before that, I want to mention about that when we are preparing the National Export Development Plan since last year, April onwards, so during last 10-month period, so we have been working with the relevant stakeholders, including exporters, including our region level entrepreneurs and the chambers, everybody. We were discussing about the new plan. So what you mentioned is 100% correct. So everybody asks about that. So there are so many strategies there. So why the new one is needed? So based on that, we mentioned no. Our vision is very much clear. To reach 36 billion export revenue, we should have a proper plan. So when you look into Sri Lanka export during last 10 years time period, say that from 2015, our export value was 13.8 billion. And by 2017, it is average 15 billion. And 23, even 15 billion. So we can see that our export sector in the level of 14 to 15 billion last 10 years time period. So we have our imports in the level of per month 1.7 billion level before our vehicle suspended time period. So therefore, so our government, so we are having a very ambitious target, how export sector can be developed to the next level. So when you look into our export, when you look into our foreign exchange revenue, so export sector represents nearly more than 60%. So balance will go to the foreign remittance and tourism income. So therefore, EDB as our government, export diversification strategy is a de-risking the economy by expanding both product and the market linkage to the National Export Development Plan. So with the new plan, we have some 3 objectives. One thing is enhancing Sri Lanka's trade competitiveness, expanding both regional and global market linkage, and promoting sustainable economic growth. So those are the key objectives we are having. So this, because earlier we had the National Export Strategy 2018-2022, So therefore, new plan incorporate lesson learned from the previous implementation while addressing the evolving global, regional and domestic trade dynamics. So therefore, previous strategy, we have seen that main part is the implementation issue. So that is why when we presented this, our presentation today, we have clearly mentioned about that we are mainly focusing on the implementation part. So therefore, we have some planning. One thing is the EDCM. So after 28 years time period, last year, January 27, we were able to reactivate the National Export Development Council of Ministers. So this is chaired by the Honorable President, including other line ministries. So therefore, quarterly basis, the NADP plan will be monitored through the EDCM. So that is the one of the key area we are focusing. Other thing is, you have seen that the plan introduced an integration national framework, bringing together cross-enabled sectors and also priority sectors. Because without cross-enabled sectors implementation, we cannot treat this our priority sectors. Therefore, you have seen the cross-enabled sectors, including trade facilitation, including trade finance, innovation, skill, and logistic operation. Those are the very much important when we are planning our priority sectors. So therefore, the EDB side, that's also we are mainly focusing. Other thing is EDB going to be restructured. So with that, PMU, the procurement unit, monetary unit will be established under the EDB. So they will take the relevant actions, and this plan will be monitored in the weekly and monthly basis with the relevant KPI process. And also this process will run by the our private sector approach also, because we have to get the involvement of the private sector as well. So all together, everyone is going to implement this NEDP plan. Other thing is from the Export Development Board side as well. So we are strengthening our coordination, implementing action of plan. That's one of the area. So other thing is enhancing our export readiness through market intelligence, capacity building, and promotional activities. Other thing is supporting export diversification and also innovations, value addition, and involvement of the SME sector. So this plan, we are mainly focusing about the SME sector as well, because right now SME sector contribution to the total of export value is below 10%, even though their contribution to the national GDP more than 52%, because our plan also get their involvement to the global value chain. So based on that, finally I can mention you that, so National Export Development Plan will be the strategic initiative with strengthening Sri Lankan export competitiveness and promoting sustainable economic growth.
Thank you. So maybe I'll take a quick reaction from our colleagues from the private sector. What is, maybe start with you, Mr. Fernando, what is your immediate reaction to some of the initiatives that EDB is going to take to ensure that this time there is going to be a greater implementation? And having said that, you also compete with similar organizations in other countries, and what are the 2 or 3 challenges that you face, as an exporter, and the barriers that Sri Lanka must look to alleviate in the next couple of years?
I think technically most of the prerequisites of transformation have been set, and I fully agree with the Deputy Minister that the target is achievable. But I think there are also 3 critical areas to make sure that these don't remain words. And I think first is to understand that Sri Lanka has a very different context and resource base to Vietnam and other nations. And therefore, our focus should be more on value than on volume, because our ability to compete with the finest Ceylon tea or Ceylon cashew or Ceylon cinnamon with cassia or blended tea, etc., is limited. And our need to diversify both products and markets is critical. If you look at the US market, we may not have much of a chance if we try to take cinnamon and compete with cassia because of the price factor. But if we distinctively connect with GI, then we have a possibility to build a premium positioning. But that requires quality infrastructure, where our local exporters, particularly growers, have
access to the kind of machinery that is needed to validate that claim, rather than having to send product to Europe or wherever for HPLC and so on at a cost of 500 euros per piece, local certification to be able to manage in the regulatory environment. The regulatory environment is going to change very quickly in Europe in a few months, and that makes a dramatic difference in our ability to talk about the finest, etc. So my suggestion would be that we focus on value, link it to the quality infrastructure that is needed to substantiate that, but also connect that to the, I think it was mentioned already by the minister, link it to the policy facilitation. For example, marketing needs a fundamentally different tax structure, needs incentives for innovation. Equipment in the tea industry is $1 million per machine. All of that needs to be facilitated if we are to compete with best in class.
And I think a similar question for you also, Mr. Dilani, especially rubber being identified as a priority sector, and sort of being in that sector is also a big sort of part of the supply chain of the mobility space. What are the challenges you face as an exporter from Sri Lanka, and what are your expectations now from the NEDP?
Yeah, so thanks, Arun. From the perspective of rubber, let me just put one context for you in place. I think I'm going to agree with Dilhan also that comparing Sri Lanka to Vietnam and India is not in the books, because one, scales are different. They are already ahead of us. Like if you take Vietnam, they are among the Samsungs, LGs that are being manufactured. If you take India, is into the automobile space, pharmaceutical. And one change that I am seeing from this new plan is that we are planning to move out of the traditional exports that we have, or the EDB is now looking at other segments, which again establishes what Dilhan says, which is the new value-added segments, which probably would be a large headwind. But having said that, one of the things that I think you mentioned, and which probably we need to also look at, is that for whatever it is worth, we need to ensure that the policy consistency for these 4 to 5 years will be held and will drive the plans that we have. So the plan is excellent. Good to see the change in direction, and it will work. Now, on the rubber, I'm not sure whether you know, but I think one of the largest single investments that came into Sri Lanka post this new government coming in was from the CN perspective from India. We invested in a plant in Medigama and in Kotugada. And the confidence level of succeeding from Sri Lanka, even with the crisis that has been created in the US, etc. Like, for example, the solid tire, we have one of the largest markets in the world. 24% of all solid tires are catered to from the Sri Lankan solid tire industry. And that compelled the CN India team to look at investing into this country and taking that Michelin factory into our stable. So the confidence level is high. Value addition amount is high. Again, an example would be the higher rupees per kg or the dollars per kg that you can get on rubber, on solids are much higher than pneumatic. So there are niche segments that we are willing to invest in and people are willing to invest in. So there is potential. But with that comes some amount of limitations as well. For example, again, we were known as a rubber growing country, and we had almost 120 million kilos of rubber harvested 15 years ago. Today we harvest only about 70 million kilos. So we are net rubber importers, which is a crucial raw material for tire. So we need to be mindful of that part. And I think through the EDB and probably getting Rubber Research Institute and other established or government institutions involved in terms of supporting the process will be needed.
And maybe now moving to Nida, I think being a development partner and you've played an active role towards in designing the strategy as well. What are the learnings from other countries that Sri Lanka can pick up? A lot of these countries have strategy, but very So what are the things that Sri Lanka can pick up from these good practice countries for effective implementation of NEDP?
Sure. Okay. Audible? Okay. So as you said, like almost every country has an export strategy. Over the past 50 years, we've seen that happen. Very few have export transformation that has happened. And what we can see from the examples across Asia and the world is there are actually like a couple of factors that drive it. Number one is having an economy-wide approach. So having an anti-export bias is going to harm you no matter what. You cannot layer export strategy over protectionism. Your strategy will fail. And we have seen the countries that have done this, which is Vietnam. I know it's a different context, but Vietnam, Korea, Malaysia, they all had an economy-wide approach. We see Sri Lanka taking the right steps, which is with the national tariff policy, removing the para-tariffs, which are causing a lot of, making the domestic market more attractive to exporters rather than export ones. So we've seen the right direction happening in Sri Lanka. We hope to see it progress further. Secondly, it's about the global value chains and plugging into the global value chains. Again, a Vietnam example, sorry, but Vietnam did not start from an end-to-end electronics thing. It plugged in where it had its comparative advantage. So, and a lot of that, like a lot of plugging into the global value chains requires like focusing on the nitty-gritties, which are not really like attractive, but are very important. And that's custom clearance, that's trade, like all the trade facilitation things, logistics. And Sri Lanka, again, is doing a lot of work on this. We've seen national single windows, authorized economic operators, advanced rulings, all of them which are critical industrial policy enablers in a GVC world. So those are extremely important. I mean, there's research out there actually, which is like 1 additional day a product is delayed before shipment reduces trade by a little over 1%, which is equivalent to about a country distancing itself 70 kilometers from its trading partners. So these things are actually critical, if not like big bang or very attractive policy directions. Also institutional coherence. Countries that have had failed economic export strategies, a lot of different institutions accountable for exports with overlapping mandate. Investors are unclear who is responsible for what. You have export zones, you have promotion bodies, you have ministries, and there's confusion. And one of the examples on this is Bangladesh. Lots of different ministries, no clarity, impacted Bangladesh actually being able to diversify away from garments. So it's very focused on garments, it couldn't do that. We have seen in other parts of the world, like such as Costa Rica, a very solid example. 2 export promotion agencies, very clear mandate, clear targets, they could make things work. And finally, everybody's favorite factor, which is politics. And it's about not the political will, it's more about persistence through political cycle. So this is a very technical area, and basically the political consensus has to be cut across all parties, all stakeholders. You cannot be a pendulum that's swinging between protectionism and liberalization, so you have to understand this is a technical area, helps every political goal and the economic goal, and kind of take that forward through all political cycles. I think those are the key factors that I can think of.
And so maybe just if I were to summarize this, there are 4 broad areas what I understand most countries are doing well wherever they're able to implement funds. One, I think, is this whole of the government approach and commitment. All agencies are tied to a national target. I think what we spoke about, even the private sector spoke about, is regulatory reform, policy reform, consistent reform. I think the third part is transparency and predictability. And I believe the fourth is public-private dialogue. Not just sort of taking comment for the sake of taking comment, but in the true spirit of incorporating the feedback. So I'll come back to you, Mr. Ratlani, and then to you, Mr. Fernando. What are the 3 or 4 things that from your sector that the government must focus on while implementing this NEDP for it to achieve its target? That's one. The second is, when we talk about whole of the government role, there is also a significant stakeholder that comes in the private sector. So what role can the private sector play in supporting these government agencies in effective implementation?
So for the first question, I would say, one, we need to hold policy. We need to be consistent with it, and we need to keep it for at least the 4 to 5 years that you're talking about. 2, we need to stick with the plan that has been made. The NDP that we are referring to, we need to ensure that we go along with it, and there would be drops, there would be faults, we need to stay with it. Because one of the things that we normally see from a Sri Lanka perspective, that when we do fall back for some reason, then we again digress and go into, like, I think somebody else also mentioned that we look at also import substitution. Yes, we can, but then that should be in the overall plan. So I'm saying from that perspective that your second question was to?
What is the role private sector can play, in
Yeah, so the private sector needs a couple of key assistance from the government. One is we need to make FDIs conducive to come into Sri Lanka. If you take today even the BOI, I'm just giving an example, I don't think they have the authority or the powers vested yet for incentives. Why I'm saying this is because when we bought in that recent investment, we went through a whole process of almost 3 to 4 months. So that's one. Second, we do not have a single window entry into the country. You need that. I believe one of the ministers did speak about it, and that will facilitate end-to-end. That's the second part. The third part, again, from a perspective of looking at the FDIs, you also need to have markets opening up for you. So we today have trade agreements with India half utilized. We have a trade agreement with Singapore unutilized. So there are areas and scope for utilization, plus there are areas and scopes to look at other trade, bilateral as well as multilateral, where we can access those markets. Again, provided they have given some access to our markets as well. So it will have to be a balance of the two. I think these are the three things I would look at.
Moving on to you, Mr. Fernando, from your sector perspective, first of all, what are the 2 or 3 things you believe the government must prioritize in implementing this NEDP? And again, do you believe that private sector can play an important role in implementation? And if yes, what role can they play?
I think we need to work on the readiness of our supply chains. The new regulatory regime starting in the EU requires supply chain responsibility that is connected to certain penalties. And I think in that context, our supply chains lack the ability, for example, to prove the sustainability of their raw materials, etc. And so in that context, my suggestion is some form of accelerator that will help, because certainly there are certain companies that have the ability to export and align with the strategy, but those companies depend on a whole lot of others, particularly in the agricultural area. Now, specific to agriculture is the fact that DIPWA was mentioned on several occasions. We need to build our climate resilience. Now, connecting again to that, the ecological and the agricultural measures that are necessary need to come through, I guess you could say a more accessible means. So certainly we talk about single window for FDI, but it needs to be the same for MSMEs who want to export. If someone wants to go, they need to understand what are my climate challenges, or I guess it's not only export, but for agriculture, because the technologies has changed, the markets have changed, the environment has changed. And that, to a large extent, requires us to address the fragmentation of tea research, rubber research, cinnamon research, etc. We have very competent and capable universities, and that may need a certain amount of review. I don't know the details there, but I would also add market access, because if you, again, going back to the comparison with Vietnam, we have far fewer FTAs than Vietnam. Looking at RCEP, several other regional, RCEP is about 30% of global trade. We need to be able to have access to these to be able to fuel the market diversification that will give us the value addition and help us to achieve this number.
And maybe, Honorable Minister, I'll move on to you. I think you've heard some of the expectations from the private sector and what needs to be done. I come from a country which could not get an FTA across the line for the first 75 years. In the last 5 to 7 years, they realized that maybe FTA is the way to go for export goods. So what is sort of your priority for your government, hearing the expectations from the private sector to help achieve the implementation of NEDP and, of course, to enhance the export growth?
I think as I listened to Mr. Fernando and Mr. Ravi, on the two sectors that we brought, who's here on stage, these two sectors or the verticals that they represent really resonates with what we want to do. So one is a local agri-based value addition that we have so much potential to go, and the strategies that we need to align in the plantation ministry and how we do cultivation is a key important thing. So I think this is a top priority that is tabled on this stage, because for our agri exports, even to sustain where it is, we need to do a huge reform within the next 1 or 2 years in terms of traceability and getting the supply chain ready. So at the same time, that also calls us to bring FDIs, because I don't see a fragmented agriculture supply chain can invest enough in terms of making this significant transformation a reality. So that is why we need to work in these both angles while we improve our supply chain, including rubber and rest of the raw material, because it gives us a greater value addition rather than importing raw material. Other side, we need to bring in the technology and the know-how through the FDI. So the first point I made at the beginning was, whilst we work on we have now agreed as a country to move away with the para-tariff and go with the new tariff policy, which is fundamental even for us to negotiate with someone else. But at the same time, that access is the only thing that's going to bring us the FDIs. So this is very funny to say, any FDI that goes to a country, $1 billion would be creating $5 billion in 3 years, right? So what is the investment appetite that we have? If you really look at the investment portfolio we have, so we are seeing even within the BOI, the majority of the investments are existing businesses expanding. So there's a big vacuum that we need to bridge. So I think that is where we hear from the private sector for the last 5 to 10 years, and that is why the new government is making significant strides in getting an investment-friendly ecosystem. Because investment-friendly ecosystem applies either to a foreign investor, even for a local investor. Now, that is why parallelly the SME Nexus platform that we are trying to build to ensure that the SME sector has great access, clarity, and services that can get exported. Now, as Mr. Fernando said, if you ask a particular agri exporter today, he would say certification is the biggest problem. There is no other problem they would argue about. One is the cost of it, the other one is time of it. Second, if you ask them, they will say, I have to go to 5 or 6 institutions to get this moving. And that is still a struggle that we are trying to facilitate, right? Thirdly, if you ask a private sector or a small business, how do you do it? We have zero incentives. I wouldn't say there's any incentive at this point. None, right? None. So this is the importance that first we need to get this prime organization, Export Development Board, as the engine of this group. So that is why we were able to convince the cabinet last 2 years to at least to get the headcount for Mr. Mangal. So it was defunct. So the institution strength. And this year also we have asked for a significant budget to incentivize. What do we incentivize? We need to incentivize innovation. We need to incentivize if somebody is doing a newer product. What would that person get? If some exporter is willing to invest in a technology that can improve productivity, he has nothing, right? So at the moment, every investment gets a what you call a accelerated tax benefit when it comes to investment. But beyond that, focused on exports, focused on market diversification, and focused on product diversification, we don't have any incentives also. Thirdly, the infrastructure piece, the biggest barrier now we have is we have enough land allocated, but nobody is willing to go beyond Western Province, right? So until the rest of the harbors like Hambantota and Trinco comes up, we might have to incentivize for a while for industries to go and set up, because it's going to happen. It's just that there is a chicken and egg situation. When is the road going to get done? When should I go? I just want to add one more thing. It was not mentioned here. Currently there's a big acute issue with skilled labor. So that is also going to hinder us in this journey. So that's why the education reform and the aligned treasury skill building initiative that's aligned to this export strategy is very important. Now somebody has to divide the number of exports by number of heads and infuse the technology and see how many people do we really need in the export sector next 5 years. I don't think we do have. Right, so I think these are like areas that we might have to crash out, and my request to the private sector is for basically to drive this for the country, because government can only do the facilitation, they can do the policy, and we will hold the policy consistent. I mean, that is the entire role of the political sphere and the leadership. But what we really need is private sector to step up and say this exact product, this exact just go. This is where we want to go, and this is what's needed by the government. A vague statement of support us, I don't think we can go much further. So when we have a very limited budget, the private sector has to probably critically say, irrespective of the company, this particular product, if we get it out there in the, this X market, and that is what the government should be proposing to. So I invite the private sector to give Mangala and the team great, finite, like crystal clear proposals for 2027 and beyond. So we have a budgeting cycle. So the 27 budgeting cycle is already over. I mean, that means we have submitted proposals with the knowledge that we have. But then we need to have programs that are really crafted to make impact. So I think this is how we will go, and we do here, and I think the teams are also inviting all the exporters to come every month, and the ministry is also listening to them. But there are certain barriers, even that we listen to them and we understand, we also struggle. So I think that is the collective journey that we will have to go as a country. And I think as Mangala said, if we have a good PMU, project management unit, and that is being monitored, that is being vocally and vociferously driven by the private sector, we will achieve more. I think that is the challenge Sri Lanka always had. There was no drive, there was not enough rigor in implementing plans, and hopefully by next year we'll have a similar forum here and see the progress of this.
Maybe Chairman, I'll build on this. ADB has an extremely crucial role to play in this whole of the government approach. We looked at, I think, 103 policy or plan of action items. Majority of them are to be implemented by agencies which are beyond the purview of ADB. So, besides the coordination role, how will you ensure that these agencies are held accountable for taking up those actions and completing them in time? So, what role do you think ADB will play in this?
Thanks, Anup. Now, ADB, anyway, this is the premier organization promoting and development export in Sri Lanka. So therefore, our responsibility is to drive the Sri Lankan export expansion strategy. So that is why we propose that when we are preparing this plan, so relevant structural changes should be implemented to the ADB side. So we clearly mentioned about that 103 kind of actions going to be implemented with the relevant organization. And also we clearly mentioned about the priority sectors. And also cross-sector enabled reforms. So those reforms are very much needed. Say for an example, trade facilitation, say again that trade logistic cooperation, innovation, skill, so then environmental category, ESG standard. So those things, reforms should be needed. So that's one of the key area. And also when we prioritize this sector, example, say that rubber sector. So Mr. Ravi is heading that association. So EDBs, we are closely working with the relevant product association too. So the rubber sector we know, so during last 10 years time period, we can see the level of So 600 to 900 million dollar value, that income is coming, export income. So we know that sector has, that association, they have separate plan. So the plan is 2.5 billion by 2030, but they need the government assistance. So with this plan, so that is why we have taken the priority sector up as well. So that government end, as our deputy minister clearly mentioned, the relevant proposal, the relevant request, EDB together Ministry of Industries, we are willing to take the next possible action. So that is why with the implementation of EDCM, so we are going to have this meeting quarterly basis, and today morning also we had nearly 2 hours discussion with Honorable President. Even we discussed about this key sector as well. So therefore we requested we need separate meeting quarterly basis to discuss relevant key sectors proposal. So with that, for the next 5 years, these key sectors, including rubber sector, as Mr. Fernando clearly mentioned about that, the C sector, sorry, spices and the T sector expansion, for logistic, say that component, then transport and logistic, again the electrical electronics, food and beverage. So those sectors will be the priority sectors. Even government also very much easy to monitor. So then with the cross-sector enablers, we clearly requested from the government, we already communicated. So relevant key ministries should drive the relevant key ministerial plan of action as well. So that is mandatory. So this proposal will be monitored through our EDCM. So otherwise, even though EDB is going to be restructured and the relevant monitoring system will be there, but finally this should be monitored with the high level political authority. So that is why the final level we are going to take EDCM also quarterly basis. So therefore the implementation part, we don't have any doubt. 100% we can monitor. The relevant KPI will be assigned to relevant officers, and this can be implemented. If any organization, if ministries, they are unable to implement, so relevant procedure, then those area will be highlighted. So therefore this government, we can see the relevant ministers, they are giving the relevant approval and the relevant positive approach to the national development plan. So that is why cabinet unanimously approved this proposal as well. And also even we have seen that some of the sectors, they are facing some difficult situations regarding our minister is there, and the home minister for an energy. We have discussed that some kind of solution should be given to the export sector. Say that even very recently we had a discussion last week, Mr. Ravi, with your association. So they requested that with the relevant current energy costs, they are unable to bear. So they are willing to go ahead with renewable energy. So from government sector, they are expecting some assistance. So that is why those kind of things we can implement very soon. So therefore sector specific meeting should be arranged quarterly basis. From the EDB side, we will take the responsibility with the relevant authority, including Ministry of Industries and the relevant our cabinet ministers plus our ADCM meeting. Those things will be arranged. So therefore, we are very much clear that this time the NADB plan can be monitored from the day one onwards.
So maybe this is a follow-up question both for the Honorable Minister and you. Do you believe there is potential to even incentivize agencies to implement faster? I'll give you an example from where I come from. I think in COVID, a lot of the Indian states were struggling to support the SMEs, and one of the ways the government incentivized, they said that if you're able to implement reform in this time of need, we will give you a greater budget allocation. So do you think there are mechanisms for incentivization within Sri Lanka as well to spur some of these agencies to move faster?
I principally disagree on that, because now we have come to a very strong fiscal discipline structure. So every ministry is disciplinedly initiating their actions with the given allocation. So I think what we need to fight now is get the relevant allocations for the relevant ministries to implement what's on the EDB. I think that way is where those ministries also will get inspired, so that the Ministry of Industries and the EDB is coming to budget discussions with them to say that, you know, this is what we need, you know, for example, now this year, since the, you know, the budgeting cycle has ended, we got the allocation of about 250 million. So when another institution is doing a project, we can infuse that money. But going forward, it has to be a collective effort that we go and, you know, from the limited fiscal space we have to bring that in. I think the incentive for growth has to be across the entire government sector. Every government employee should be part of this game plan. And I think the government should be figuring out an incentivizing scheme, looking at the trajectory of the nation. Right, how much is the GDP is growing and how much is the exports are growing. Based on that, all the government institutions should get that. I think for the moment, as Mangala said, we might have to use the existing structure of executive presidency and you know, Minister of Cabinet Ministers to drive this home. But you are right. In future, we need to have more of an institutional structure. That the incentive for the institution is greater, that you don't need a political push to, you know, make these changes happen. But the importance is this pivot, this 5 years to 10 years, we will have to drive this home. I think that is what I think of, you know, the incentive for implementation. And I just wanted to add one more thing on the parallel. We are creating another institution called ITA that is to drive transformation. So because SME sector also need a lot of strength in transforming itself, being productive and being export oriented. So I think that is the role of the IDB, the historic role of Industrial Development Board was not functioning. So whilst Export Development Board helps us to get this framework done and do the promoting part, there should be an institution that drives change within the organizations and the supply chain so that it becomes real. So that is why I am saying this is not happening in isolation, that that particular institution is by next January will be on the floor, live and running. So these are things that, these are reforms that will make a nation transform. So I think as much as we talk about export as the pinnacle outcome, I think there is a lot of reforms that need to take place, especially in the plantation ministry and the agriculture ministry. I think that is being a key, either a raw material or a value adding possibility that we have. And then as mentioned very clearly, the export-led growth will never happen without imports being part of it. So this implementation of the 4-band tariff policy and getting the rest of the industrialists aligned to it and getting a very strong industrial policy that is backing the export strategy is very important. So we are happy to see that now the World Bank and IMF and the development partners are also talking about industrial policy after 2 decades, so that we could get the next step by next year, that our industrial policy is also established like this, and that it also has a very strong backing to this strategy, because exports cannot be isolated and pushed forward. So the industrial policy has to come and say, you know, where is the infrastructure, where is the raw material, where is the university system connecting to it, where is the education and skill coming to it, what is the type of incentives you are going to get, how do you incentivize investments. All these are embedded in the industrial policy. And this export strategy will not have those components that's going to support the ecosystem. So just wanted to add that there is parallel paths that we are driving as Ministry of Industries.
Chairman, this is maybe a follow-up question. You spoke about the expectation of opening up new markets. NEDP explicitly has one of the objectives is to diversify Sri Lankan exports into the market. So what is EDB's view on this?
I think that's one of the very important area you asked about this thing. And our NADP, we are discussing about the product diversification and the market diversification too. So when it comes to the market diversification, so you know that right now Sri Lankan export 25% go to the USA, So again, 23% going to the EU countries. So our export diversification strategy, mainly, further we are expanding our presence in those countries. We are moving to the Middle East, African and Asian countries as well. So based on that, right now Sri Lanka very much good positive situation. So Sri Lanka, we are having the FTA with India, FTA with Pakistan, FTA with Singapore. Hopefully very soon, Sri Lanka-Thailand agreement will be completed. And very recently government given the green positive approach for the RCEP. So therefore 15 countries will be included this agreement as well. So then our exporters can export those products, those countries with the RCEP model. So then again the GSP plus. So government is very much keen to continue the GSP plus facility as well. So then 27 countries can be covered. More than 6,400 exports products can be exported to those 27 countries. Anyway, UK government declared zero tariff from January 27 to 26 onwards. So more than 92% products can be exported to the UK with the zero tariff. Anyway, that right now the USA agreement is being negotiated. Hopefully by 9 July government will be able to give the relevant process. And then government main key approach, even EDB plus EDCM we requested, if you are going for export expansion, we need reasonable FTA as well. So otherwise with the limited FTAs, country cannot reach the relevant export target. So that is why FTA plus PTA, preferential trade agreement, also very much important. So with the relevant countries, based on the export potential, government is willing to continue those relevant agreement. Other good thing is the Japanese government, they have shown the interest for the economic corridor, Sri Lanka, India and Japan government. Hopefully today that matter also we discussed with the high level. So hopefully that also will be completed very soon. So by considering those things, we can see by using Sri Lanka as a destination, all investors, they can come here, invest and then export to the other countries by using these FTAs. So today you can export to the EU with a 0% tariff. Likewise, relevant agreement, the countries we are going to sign the agreement, so 10% will be there. So government further will consider this matter because this current government, we want to mention that government treats export sector as a private sector. So that is why within 1.5 years time period, so we were able to complete many EDCM meetings. So we were able to complete this National Export Development Plan, and we had scheduled to have a Sri Lanka Expo tomorrow by June, the initial plan. So then we have postponed to January with considering with the current Middle East situation. So why this government giving those priorities for the export sector? So because government considers export is one of the key sectors. Further, we want to expand. So therefore, in future we can expect those presence will be there, those supports will be there from the government then. So therefore, we'll be able to implement relevant export diversification with the relevant FTAs in near future.
So we've heard what the private sector wants. We've also heard what the government is doing. What role do you think development partners such as yours, and you've been, like I said, part of this exercise since the beginning, can play in effectively achieving the targets that the government has set out for?
So we as development partners have a supporting role, right? We support the government, we support the private sector where possible. Well, first of all, we're very proud and honored to be part of the National Export Development Plan and helping the Export Development Board. So the fundamental thing we can help with is technical assistance. We are already helping with, as the Honorable Minister mentioned, on the ITA as well. So we are trying to support the government through technical assistance. We have technical assistance with EDB, MOI, customs. So all these areas we are already supporting on. Then, as you can see from a little footnote at the edge of your agendas, this program, our technical assistance to NEDP sits under our trade investment and industry development policy based on. So financing is a thing that we can help provide, especially like through to Ministry of Finance in the budget support, and that can help us champion the Ministry of Finance for such kind of reforms. So that's the third thing. I think IFIs and development partners have a huge role in playing a coordination role because we engage with all different actors. So we can help coordinate against the NEDP framework and have that be the driving force because we can play a coordination role on that front. And then finally, through our private sector arms, we can also crowd in private sector financing to help any specific bankable projects that come up. So those are very specific supporting roles we can play for the government and the private sector.
And let me put you back to this point. Let's say we meet 3 years from now, and nobody knows this better than you in terms of designing measurable outcomes. So what do you think will be a key measurable outcome if you meet 3 years from now that says that NEDP has achieved this objective?
On this, should be, the easy one is like the export. Export is a percentage of GDP kind of, but I think for NEDP itself, it should be the number of exporters, the Sri Lankan exporters, and more specifically, the number of Sri Lankan exporters entering and surviving in the international market. So that would be a very critical indicator 3 years from now, because that's what NEDP is trying to do, is trying to lower the barriers to entry for exporters. So that's what we would like to see.
And what about you, Mr. Birla? What could you consider a success for NEDP in 3 years from now?
Yeah, so again, I'm going back to 3 things. One, I think like you said, what are the new industries that have come in? Because you're looking at non-traditional, the NEDP is planning for this, the NEDP is planning for 4 new industries or 5 new industries which are non-traditional. So we would look at what are the new industries that have come into Sri Lanka? What is the FDI that has come in the last 2 years? And most importantly, the last point for me, which I should say, the first point is that how consistent have we been with our policy framework and how consistent have we been with the plan that has been drawn up? So that, again, going back to what the minister said, if you have a DMU monitoring it, then we know exactly where we are in the first 3 months, first 6 months. It's going to be a journey of 4 years. It's going to take some time. So probably by 2 years, if I've met about 30-40% of what we planned for, good enough.
What about you, Mr. Fernando? If 3 years from now we meet this panel again, hopefully with a greater gender representation, what would success look like for you?
I think the parameters, the measurable criteria, it's quite clear, but I think for me, there is one factor, taking into consideration the climate challenge, I would like to see, and in the interest of the future, how sustainable, how have we embraced the green growth priority? Because this regulatory environment, yes, it's a challenge, but I think if we rise to the occasion, Alina and QI, we are able to turn that challenge into a competitive advantage because we have the advantage of biodiversity, we have the advantage of soils. If you throw a stone, you're going to hit a product that has a phenomenal quality advantage, whether it is cinnamon or cashew or pepper or cardamom, clove, the list goes on. And so we need to connect with value to make sure that the growth is aligned with Sri Lanka's specific priorities and make sure that it is sustainable. And to be sustainable, it needs to follow a green growth trajectory. That would be my measure.
Chairman EDB, what would success look like for you?
So next 3 years time period, no? So our progress will be evident through higher and more diverse export earning, more SME participation, measurable progress towards 36 billion export revenue. So that's within next year's our target.
And I move to you, Honorable Minister. You heard everybody's expectation and how realistic those expectations are in the next 3 years, and what would success look like for you maybe 3 years from now?
I think I'm putting myself in trouble by recording this. I think keep all aside single window for investment and single window for trade. Without those two, we are not going to make any of these things. So within next 3 years, it has to be there, functioning, and as a facilitator, right? But if you really look at numbers perspective, I would like to see the value creation of our raw material going up at least 20 to 30% from where we are today. So basically, if you take our cinnamon to tea to rubber to, all those agri-based raw material, this obviously will have to get through the, the value addition that the world is demanding. So if you really start monitoring it today, so that same quantity with a higher productivity, yielding a higher dollar value is what we probably need to see through all these things. I am yet to see that number, but we need to establish this number, Mangala, to see that we are going to the right direction. Second, to see if we can attract 5 to 10 investments, FDIs, that will establish accessing wider markets that we want to access, right? Because that is going to set us a trajectory that we are doing the right thing. Thirdly, we've been monitoring the SME sector on exports. So we have a whole bunch of exporters who are below $20 million a year. So if we can get 5 or 10 of them to 100 million mark, I think that will be a great achievement because that is called scale up. So that's the whole strategy the ministry is going about. It's called scale up. So we want to identify the high potential, high export SMEs and grow them to the next level. So if those 3 specific outcomes can be achieved through next 3 years, we will know whatever is that in that book is making results. So I think I will commit to that now and we'll establish and drive.
I know the audience wants to quickly go for tea. We've been getting a lot of questions and I think most I've asked. But Honorable Minister, one question I think particularly is towards you where people are saying that we've spoken about the things we are going to do. Is the ministry going to be, can they set up a live dashboard where people can monitor the progress of NEDP?
So that's EDB has promised to do that. I think it's important to see the timelines driving towards, but then if you are to have all red or all amber, that's going to demoralize us as well. So I think it won't come up within next few months, but at least we need about a year to get this engine moving. So especially the commitment from the line agencies. I think a dashboard, not for 103, at least for not 103, but at least for, selected items. Agreeable dashboard that is practically achievable is important so that we all see it and that transparency we will keep. So beyond a dashboard, I think what we really need is because the dashboards don't run without KPIs being agreed. So unfortunately majority of the 103 here is KPIs are given to other lead agencies like the BOI, like the customs, like so I think our main challenge is to get them sign up with these KPIs. So then only probably we might be able to monitor it digital. So I would say within a year or so we will get there.
Thank you, Mr. and thank you everyone. I think for this we've also looked at the questions from the audience, so we've pretty much covered